It was a bright morning. There were flowers everywhere, and the guests were there. The groom and the priest were at the altar. While the guests waited for the bride, they whispered that the bride at this wedding was the daughter of Count Philin. They say she is the daughter of Count Philin and his late former countess. How old is Lady Lily? According to what they heard, she is only 16 years old. It is not too soon for her to get married. But imagine, she wants to take a child as her husband. Something illegal is happening in this story. People were whispering that it was an unwanted wedding, but there had to be some reason to get married. Right, perhaps people thought the bride didn't hear them or didn't care. Lily didn't seem like a happy bride, and people were saying that, although she was young, or rather a child, she understood business. She seemed to have received a large sum of money for the wedding. But why did the Duchess of Baldwin choose the Count's young lady? It is said that the Duchess and the late former Countess maintained a close relationship after the Duke's death. It was probably decided to accept her friend's daughter while providing protection to the young Grand Duke. It is a wedding in name only. That is all. The bride bent down so her little groom could lift the veil. Lily was an incredibly beautiful child. The sun was shining on her face, decorating her sky-blue eyes. Our little groom was also quite handsome for an 8-year-old Glenn. The day that they met, the bride hadn't even gone through the coming-of-age ceremony. And the 8-year-old groom, they got married without knowing each other personally. Lilia knows what people were whispering. For him too, a marriage of convenience cannot be the wedding he desired. And yet, Glenn took Lily's hand and said, "My lady, he will take responsibility. He swears he will make her happy." Glenn was so sweet when he made that promise. And for the little groom, it was so reliable that our young heroine felt a slight relief. She told Glenn that she would make him happy too. So Lily gave him this promise, that promise, which, unfortunately, she could never keep. After all, Lily died. She died slowly on the ground in the pouring rain. In front of her, there was a letter from Glenn. Lily reached out for it with all her might. In this letter, Glenn wrote that he would graduate from the academy as the top student in his class. He asked her to come to the graduation ceremony and make this event brighter. Lily wanted to go and congratulate him. Her life flashed before her eyes. The only thing she could think about was Glenn. Lily thought she was a bad wife who couldn't even keep her promise. But Glenn kept his, because of the 8 years he spent with her. These were the happiest moments of her life. Through tears, she silently asked Glenn to be happy. This was more than enough for her from the beginning. She wanted him to forget her and meet someone. She hoped he would be the happiest. Glenn woke up under the same cold rain a couple of years later. Lily's wish didn't come true. Glenn couldn't forget her, and he wasn't happier without her. After waking up from a nightmare, Glenn couldn't regain his senses immediately. The first thing he said was his wife's name. The door opened, and the butler entered. He apologized for being rude and said he heard a noise. Something happened, Glenn replied. He had a nightmare. The butler immediately understood what was happening and asked him if he had dreamed of the Duchess again. Glenn replied yes, so the butler offered to bring him a cup of hot tea. But Glenn lowered his head melancholically towards the window and said there was no need for that it wouldn't make things better. He said that Lily appears in his dreams almost every day in those moments. It seems like she is somewhere nearby and is calling him, as if saying she is alive. But even without that, he never not once forgot her. Glenn added sadly, the man who still thought about his wife. It reminds us that this story is fiction. So many years have passed, and he is still thinking about her. It's a fantasy on the level of Alice in Wonderland. Nadia's mother called her and asked her what attracted her so much, and Nadia replied, "Nothing." It seemed as if someone was calling her, a sad and familiar smile, saying that Lilia is in front of us. Our unrealistic man, sitting at the table in front of a mountain of documents. He said how tired he was. But then the butler knocked on his door and brought a bunch of new documents that Glenn needed to review. Glenn, with a grim expression, asked how Allison could say such a thing when he was buried in papers. And the butler explained to him, nothing can be done about it. They are important documents about the Baldwin family's finances and the budget plan. Glenn asked why Allison didn't check them himself. He was the head butler, he replied. He cannot do this. The lady of the family must do this work. Since there is no lady at the moment, the Duke must look at them. What an unequivocal insinuation. Glenn did not like it, and said that it seemed to be his job, because that place would remain empty forever. Another reminder of the unreality of the story. Glenn asked if anything had happened the night before, and Allison replied that something had happened, but nothing important enough to report. But Glenn asked to be told about it anyway. Allison said. They say there are disturbances in the area that borders the Hess lands. It was reported that the population of these lands was digging a mine there. Glenn asked how they dared. Hess is a baronial family, Allison replied. Yes, it consists of a baron, his wife, and his adopted daughter. Her name is Nadia Hess. According to what he heard, 10 years ago they took in a girl found in the forest and raised her. 10 years ago, just after Lily died, Glenn said he would go there personally. And right now, he still wanted some fresh air. Allison said he would prepare for his departure. Glenn stood in front of the window, twirling his ring, repeating Nadia's name. It seemed that the nonsense about fidelity to a dead wife was ending. Deep in the mines, some workers were working hard when someone arrived and said, "Good job." It was Nadia Hess. She brought everyone a glass of water and asked them to drink it before continuing. The men immediately got worried because she had come to a place where dirty work was being done. But our kind heroine replied that everyone was working very hard for these lands and that she had to help in some way. The men said she was completely different from who she was when they brought her to the estate 10 years ago. Back then, she was a thin and quiet girl. Everyone praised Nadia for her pure and clean heart. When the Baroness got sick and was bedridden, Nadia began to manage their lands. Looking at Nadia, they remember the Duchess, who was said to govern the Baldwin Duchy, while the workers praised the heroine in every possible way for her kindness. And so on, Nadia herself noticed someone. There was a child working in the mine. It seemed that Nadia was not very happy about this. She called the child, and she asked him if he had come looking for his father. She was sorry, but he couldn't go in there. The mine is too dangerous for children. The boy was silent for a moment and said he had heard that the Baroness was sick, and this mine helps pay for medicine, he heard the adults say. He also wants to be useful. Like all the angels in this world, each one is kinder than the next. When the child asked if he could help too, Nadia, that is Lilia, remembered her 8-year-old husband. She tried to forget it quickly, smiling at the child, and told him she was really grateful for those thoughts. But it's okay, the Baroness won't like that. Instead of covering the cost of medicine with money earned by such a small child, the Baroness will declare that she prefers to remain sick in bed. He shouldn't worry so much. She will also work hard to make sure his mother gets better. Nadia decided that she would do everything possible to make the Baroness feel better, and thus return the favor to Baron Hess and his wife, who gave her a new life that day. 10 years ago, Lilia Baldwin died. However, no one knows that the dead Lily Baldwin woke up in the body of a 10-year-old red-haired girl. She woke up in bed at the home of the Baron and Baroness, who were visibly worried about the baby. The Baroness said they found her unconscious in the forest. They couldn't leave her there. That's why they brought her here. While the Baroness spoke, Lilia thought she didn't know how it had happened. But when she realized she had awakened in another body, at first she thought that never again in her life did she want to return to the life of Lilia Baldwin. The trauma was too deep. Of course, there are things she left behind and loved, but she has no intention of going back to look for them, since from the beginning it was a place that didn't suit her. Baron Hess and his wife didn't ask anything. They believed her words that she didn't remember anything, and even gave her the name Nadia Hess. And they adopted her, so the things she received in Lilia's life, she uses for them, because she decided that this is now her real life. So from now on we will call her Nadia. The workers shouted, "There are magic stones in the mine." Nadia thought it was about time they appeared. They had been digging in the same place all morning. She was worried that they wouldn't be there, but I'm glad they finally found them. Unexpectedly, 2 officers asked who gave them permission to dig here. These were the Knights of Baldwin, apparently, the past life that Nadia so clearly avoids. In the end, it will catch up with her. There will be no way to escape. The workers got worried, but Nadia said she would handle it. Nadia asked the knights what brought them there. The knight asked, and they listened to what he said. He asked who gave them permission to dig in this mine. Nadia replied that these were Baron Hess's lands. They needed permission to dig in their own mine. The lands belonged to them. The knight declared that that was nonsense and wanted to continue the argument. However, a painfully familiar voice said, "What useless noise?" Nadia froze in her place. Her beloved husband, whom she was trying so hard to forget, appeared before her, of course. He had grown up, but Nadia immediately recognized Glenn, who did not recognize her and asked coldly, "Is she the head of the Hessian barony?" But Nadia was so stunned by this encounter that she couldn't answer him immediately. Glenn looked intently at Nadia and thought, "This woman, fire-red hair. She wears tattered clothes and looks about 20 years old. She seems to be the adopted daughter of a baron and a baroness." He was definitely seeing her for the first time, but why? Since romance was sprouting from every hole, Glenn immediately felt the familiar aura of his beloved wife. Suddenly, a man appeared and ran towards Nadia, calling her and asking her. At least she should have told him what brought her to that place. The man was clearly worried about her, so much so that he didn't immediately notice Duke Baldwin. One of the knights informed the Duke that the people of the Jess lands found magic stones in this mine. It was clear from Glenn's face that he did not expect this. The knight added that the circumstances were very suspicious. The Jess barony lacked the means and the information to extract the magic stones. However, they identified this particular vein for excavation. At that moment, Nadia decided to intervene in their conversation. She introduced herself and said she paid her respects to Duke Baldwin. Her father also bowed and also said he expressed his respect to the Duke. Glenn said he heard that Baron Hess had adopted an intelligent girl, but he never imagined she would be brave enough to extract magic stones right under the noses of the Baldwin Duchy. People started whispering that it wasn't worth digging there. Then, Nadia said she admitted that this mine was adjacent to the Baldwin Duchy's territory, but it clearly belonged to her family. For some reason, such obvious evidence did not convince Glenn, and he asked her why she was so sure. Nadia replied that people believe this mountain range belongs to the Baldwin Duchy. The maps show it that way. However, 100 years ago, when the Baldwin and Hess families were united through marriage, information emerged. The fact that the lower part of the mountain range was donated to the House of Hess. This mine is part of that donated territory. In other words, the House of Hess did not illegally invade the lands of the Baldwin Duchy. Glenn stated that, although she was an adopted daughter, she knew the history of the Hess territory thoroughly. She even remembers events from 100 years ago that no one else would remember. Nadia's knowledge seems suspicious to Glenn, and it seems she needs to get out of this situation. Luckily, the Baron came to the rescue. He told them that his Nadia loved reading books from a young age. If we talk about her family's history, she knows everything from the founder, and she is also incredibly intelligent, the support of her family. While Dad was proud of his daughter, the Duke could not take his eyes off Nadia. It seemed he was ready to leave his past behind. And his late wife. Glenn ordered the Baron to mark exactly where they believed the border was, and also to send documentation to the duchy, confirming their previous claims. After reviewing them, he will determine if the House of Jess's claims are justified. Having finished speaking, the Duke left. Nadia noticed that the Baron was trembling and finally dropped to the ground. The Baron exhaled and said, "Poor heart, he really thought they were going to be in serious trouble. He should have left her in the hands of her father." He told Nadia what would have happened if they had taken her away. His mother would have given her a reprimand. Nadia replied that everything was fine, that it was she who suggested extracting stones here. Besides, the Duke doesn't arrest anyone without a reason. Anyway, Nadia suggested that everyone return to work. Although Nadia tried to smile and support the others, she still couldn't get over the encounter with her ex-husband. Nadia remembered that Glenn said that Madame's hair was like moonlight when Glenn was still a baby. She saw her adult husband for the first time, Glenn remembered, and I thought that Glenn had grown up so wonderfully that he said she was like the moon to him. Now that she had seen him again, Glenn was like the sun, but still she couldn't return to him. In the duchy, Allison said, these are documents sent by the Hess barony. They reviewed the materials to verify their accuracy and found no evidence of falsification or copying. Glenn asked if they were to correct the mine's ownership with Hess, what would their chances be? Allison replied that if they had entered into a power struggle, Baldwin would naturally have won. Glenn asked what would happen if they approached this fairly, with the right reasoning, and Allison replied, given that it legitimately belongs to Hess, House Baldwin will lose. There is a record that House Baldwin granted lands to Hess 100 years ago, and even after all contact between the two families was completely cut off, there is no evidence that the land was returned. It seemed that neither party had paid much attention, so this fact had been neglected all this time. Then Glenn asked, how did Lady Hess know about such a place? How did she understand that magic stones could be found in a place that seemed useless? Allison replied that luck seemed to be on the side of the virtuous Baron and the Baroness Hess. They say heaven favors the virtuous. The last sentence made Glenn so angry that he lost his temper and started complaining about his fate. Once again, what nonsense. If heaven really took care of good people, his wife would be alive and enjoyed heavenly happiness more than anyone. Allison said he was wrong. Glenn then admitted that he had been too sensitive and suggested continuing the conversation later. He leaned dramatically towards the window, feeling sorry for himself, but quickly remembered Nadia. Glenn convinced himself that when he met her, for a moment he remembered Lily, her impeccable etiquette. The brusque way of speaking, but more than that, the way she looked at him reminded him of Lily. It didn't occur to him to think that he simply liked another girl and that he had started to forget his dear wife. But he came to think that he was going crazy. Outwardly, there was not a single similarity between them. Looking at the moon, Glenn turned to Lily and asked her to observe her husband's condition. 10 years have passed since she left, but he still cannot accept it, searching for traces of her in a woman who looks nothing like her. Meanwhile, Nadia was sitting with a book, in the same sad state as Glenn. The door was ajar, and the candle went out. A stranger put a sword to Nadia's throat. The man asked if it was her who had sent the letter. How dare she impersonate that person? She doesn't value her life at all. Despite the dangerous situation, Nadia didn't seem worried. Looking the man straight in the eyes, she said that a long time had passed since their last meeting, but that he couldn't even recognize his mistress. How insolent, Conrad, the man said very bravely. He didn't release the sword. His mistress is not the type of person you can speak of so lightly that he cut off a lock of Nadia's hair. But even then, Nadia didn't show a drop of alarm, she said, posing as her. That it seemed to amuse her a little. Nadia said that if she were an imposter, how could she forge her mistress's handwriting? And he was also interested in knowing about the key, which was why he had traveled all that way. Besides, given her personality, she would have ignored the letter. People know Conrad as the Viscount or Lawful, but before that, he was a slave, sold to a gambling house at age 5 for his father's debts. To save his little sister, he entered the game empty-handed and almost lost his eye. And the only one who saved him and kept him alive. Do you remember who it is? Yes, Nadia asked. Conrad said with uncertainty, this is impossible. His mistress died 10 years ago. He saw her body himself. Nadia said that if he still doesn't believe her, he can continue when he gets trapped in the gambling house. He asked why he ended up in this dirty pit. Was he kidnapped, or did he make a terrible mistake? Or maybe. Conrad lowered his sword and continued after Nadia. Or rather, he fought and was determined to live, even if his life was just as useless, like an insect's life, and who took that life away was his mistress, Lady Lily. Conrad approached Nadia slowly, and lowering his hood, he asked if it was really Lady Lily, and this baby had grown huge. Nadia replied, to be precise, no longer. After death and rebirth, she became Nadia Hess. Conrad knelt and said the name doesn't matter. She is his only mistress, and it is an honor for him to be reunited with his lady Nadia, another man who has shown her his loyalty. Nadia asked him if he already called her that. She is grateful. He is probably disappointed that she didn't start looking for him immediately after her resurgence. Conrad objected, not at all, she had reasons for everything, even for calling him now. The boy was witty. Nadia asked him for the key she entrusted to him. He still has it. She needs the key. Conrad replied that, of course, he had the key, but after 10 years many traces had disappeared. Nadia replied that it didn't matter. She asked to bring the key as soon as possible. Conrad asked, he understood, but could he ask what she was going to do? Nadia replied, rewards. She plans to catch criminals and get rewards for them. The key is the evidence Nadia collected when she was Duchess of Baldwin that allows her to eliminate numerous criminal organizations. Corroding the lands, she collected them and kept them as evidence, this code that only she and Conrad used. Conrad asked if the lady needed money. Nadia replied yes, the Baroness Hess was sick. She needs medicine, and it is very expensive, and recently she found a vein of magic stones that she saved for an emergency. But there can never be too much free money. Nadia noticed the look on Conrad's face and asked, are you wondering why she didn't return to the Baldwin family? It is not true that if she becomes a duchess again, the cost of medicine will be a trifle. The reasons are simple. Nadia began to explain. Firstly, she does not want to cause a scandal with that statement, that Lilia Baldwin returns in this body. Secondly, even if she solves this problem, she has personal reasons, not wanting to use the Baldwin family's assets. She remembered the voice asking her for help. The voice that spoke was Lilia's father's, who married his mistress and is trying to kill her. How can she not believe him? Why is she such a bad daughter that she doesn't even believe her own mother? Nadia also remembered the maids, whispering that Louis would become a countess, and remembered her vile father and stepmother, who promised her a large sum of money if she married, and kept repeating that Lilia had to prove her worth. Surely these same vile people are related to Lilia's death when remembering her past. Nadia became sad. Nadia confessed to Conrad that she no longer wanted to be Lilia Filling. She didn't want to return to those places, so I decided to live this new life with gratitude. A good plan, right? Nadia asked. Conrad replied automatically yes, if that is Lady Nadia's wish. But he himself thought, what if someone finds out? That Lady Nadia is Lady Lily. She will never be able to live a peaceful life again. Glenn sat on the library floor reading something, thinking about how pathetic he was. Only he thought that the longing for his dead wife led him to this. Glenn read the diary that Lilia left him. Every page of this diary made him happy and at the same time sad. He read how Lily wrote. Glenn sent a bouquet and a letter from the academy to the estate. He wrote that the white flowers reflected the moonlight at night. They had a silver shine on their petals and reminded him of her. He was curious, so he put the bouquet on the windowsill and waited until the moon came out. The petals really shone. He looked at them for a long time. Glenn remembered these flowers well. She feels sorry that he sends her a gift when he is busy studying, but she can't hide how much happier it makes her. She is also glad to know he is doing well in the academy and wishes he would send her updates more often. If he gets along with his friends, what will happen if he gets sick? Her worries touched Glenn as he closed the diary. He noticed that the paper had fallen out. Looking at it, Glenn realized it was a map of magic stone veins. Lily marked them. Instead of connecting the dots, Glenn again got lost in thoughts of how wonderful his wife was and how intelligent she was. Finally, a marked spot caught Glenn's attention. Judging by the map's markings, this is undoubtedly the mine that the Hesse barony recently excavated. Lily knew there were magic stones there, and Nadia Hesse also knew about them. As much as Glenn thought about it, it was suspicious, even if the adopted daughter knew the family history well. It's quite strange that she knows things from 100 years ago that no one remembers, and that's what worries him the most. This look might just be a coincidence. Maybe Nadia Hesse knew something related to Lily, so Glenn decided to see her. At that moment, Nadia was fast asleep in her bed. She was dreaming of a sunny day. She was in the garden, where beautiful flowers grew at every step. Little Lily collected these flowers. Lily called her mother and she turned, smiling sweetly at her daughter. She had a gentle gaze. Not at all like Lily remembered. Her mother was healthy and beautiful like the flowers. Lily was a small copy of her mother, who asked who those flowers were for. Lily brought them to her. Taking the flowers, the mother said they were very beautiful. She hugged her daughter tightly and thanked her for the gift. She repeated how much she loved her daughter. Lilia also said she loved her mother more than anything in the world. They were happy, but as we know, happiness can be destroyed in an instant. Her vile father brought a mistress home and declared that this was now his new family. As expected, the man was not satisfied with Lilia's beautiful mother. They also had the audacity to ask Lilia to be their friend. Lust and immorality in men are not uncommon. Little Lily clung to her mother, but when she looked at her face, she saw that her mother's expression was hidden in the shadow. But Lilia felt that something had broken somewhere, and from that day on, her mother's smile disappeared forever. Sometimes she sat in silence, like a dead woman. Other days she destroyed everything in the house. And sometimes she would collapse on Lily, shouting that Lily had to save her, that the count and his mistress were trying to kill her. They aimed to take her place as countess. Her mistress tried to push her down the stairs to kill her. The servants sent her poisoned food. Lilia didn't believe her. She said there were no traces of poison in the food. She asked her mother to eat at least a little to regain her strength. But her mother screamed. Lilia was really taking their side. Lily wanted to help her mother, but her sincerity never reached her. And in the end, Lily ran away from her mother. This situation was too painful for a little girl. She locked herself in her room. The butler arrived and told her that her mother was asking for her. The mistress's condition was worsening. Before it was too late, Lady Lily didn't want to see her again, but as soon as Lily remembered her mother's screams, she trembled and started to cry. Seeing her state, the butler lowered his gaze sadly and apologized. The mother's dull gaze searched for Lilia and continued calling for her baby until her last breath. The funeral took place shortly after, and her mother's death naturally broke Lilia's heart, literally killing her. But on the other hand, Lily was finally freed from the monster. The stepsister pointed at Lily and called her a monster for not shedding a tear. Quite bold for someone whose mother is a murderer, Lily couldn't sleep that night. She decided a little fresh air might help, so she went out, when she suddenly heard the bitch talking. A rather persistent creature, bribing servants, getting poison. How much money they spent, a vile father and his bedfellow. Late at night, they celebrated that they had managed to kill Lilia's mother, and that now they were in charge here. Lily froze in horror hearing their conversation, and at that moment, something inside her broke. Suddenly, whose voice asked, "Well, Lily, Mom was right, she told me. They tried to kill her. She begged her, asked to be saved, but Lilia didn't believe her. Although Lilia loved her, she wouldn't have left her alone in her final days. Lilia's coldness killed her own mother. Besides, she didn't cry in front of her mother's coffin, and now Lilia herself started calling herself a monster." Nadia woke up screaming and horrified by this nightmare, although it would have been better if it had been a nightmare instead of a memory. No matter how much Nadia tried to forget her past, it caught up with her again and again. Trembling with fear, Nadia repeated, "Everything is fine, everything is fine, everything is fine." But the voice kept blaming her for her mother's death. Through tears, Nadia convinced herself that she was no longer Lily. She was now Nadia Hess. Early in the morning, Nadia went to see the sick Baroness and told her it was time to take her medicine. She asked if her mother had slept well. Now Nadia called her mother, and although the Baroness's illness reminded Nadia of her own mother, Nadia continued smiling and swore that she wouldn't run away now. The Baroness thanked Nadia for taking care of her early in the morning, when Nadia could have simply asked the maid to do it. Nadia replied by insisting on bringing her the medicine herself. She wanted to talk to her mother for the first time in a long time. Nadia asked her how her mother was feeling. Mom replied that she had already improved since she started taking the medication, that she needed to get better soon so she could take care of the estate. Nadia works a lot. At her age, she needs to enjoy life. She should start looking for a partner to marry. Nadia's reaction made her mother tease her and ask if she already had someone to whom she was willing to entrust her heart. If this is her decision, her mother will support her, regardless of her status or title, Nadia said. Nothing of the sort. And then she thought about who she was willing to entrust her heart to, and Glenn immediately came to mind. If she could choose someone, it would be Glenn, but she didn't expect them to meet like this. But Glenn has grown so much, hasn't he, when that little guy has become so big? It seemed that the youth in her voice had already disappeared when Nadia thought about it. It seemed sad and happy at the same time. Of course, Mom noticed that look and couldn't help but pay attention. That's why. She took Nadia's hand and told her that she knew that Nadia had always tried very hard for her father, and for the property. However, she would like Nadia to smile. Nadia, the heiress who will lead the GS legacy. And she is always grateful for how Nadia works, but she asks her not to overdo it. She wants Nadia to take care of herself, her father, herself, and the people of the Hess estate. Nadia is a truly amazing girl. Old thoughts about the terrible past, about screams and insults went through Nadia's head. But thanks to her mother's warmth and love, Nadia put those thoughts aside quite easily. Nadia told herself that she could only live there. And as she went down the stairs, she noticed a stranger. The stranger seemed very energetic and was arguing something with the Baron and the butler. Nadia wondered what was happening there. Then the girl noticed Nadia and started greeting her. Finally, the girl introduced herself. Her name is Vivian, and from today she will serve Lady Nadia. You could see how happy Vivian was with this job. She was practically radiant. The Baron approached Nadia and whispered, "I need to explain." This girl appeared out of nowhere and declared that she would be Nadia's personal servant. Vivian shouted, "Not out of nowhere. She came here on orders from her master." Vivian seemed to be too energetic. She declared that the young lady was her master's savior. The Viscount Odile Nadia froze immediately, but this name meant nothing to the Baron. The poor man didn't understand anything, and Vivian kept repeating that recently her Viscount had had an accident. While I was passing by the Hess estate, Lady Nadia, who was passing by, was there at that moment. She rushed to help. Thanks to her, the Viscount was able to avoid serious injuries. What a romantic way of thinking Vivian has. As a token of his gratitude, the Viscount sent her to Baron Hess's house and ordered her to take good care of his savior. The story was completely fictional, but Vivian asked if Lady Nadia remembered her. Nadia replied with uncertainty. Yes, of course, it was time for Nadia to lie. She said that the Viscount allowing them to have a personal servant in their situation was truly a great act of kindness. It would be rude to refuse, no, so she decided to accept Vivian. Since that was the case, she would go and teach Vivian her duties on the estate. She would explain everything well so that she wouldn't become a burden in the house. The Baron asked the butler if it was the first time she had come to them like this. And the guy replied that it didn't seem that chaotic to him. When Nadia and Vivian entered her room, the masks were off. Vivian asked her how she was. She was good, Nadia replied. Not bad, but grabbing the hand of the lady she serves. Inappropriate behavior for a servant, Vivian replied. We will keep that in mind, Lady Nadia. Nadia added that it wasn't worth addressing her by her name either. It was better to call her my lady, even in private. Vivian immediately called Nadia my lady. Then Nadia said, clearly, Conrad sent her a smart girl. Vivian replied, of course, because her Viscount would go through fire and water without hesitation when it comes to my lady. Nadia replied that she understood, he would send his most capable subordinate. Then Nadia asked what Vivian was best at, and she needed to know so she could make the most of her. Vivian replied that she specializes in assassinations. Well, that was to be expected, but Nadia did not expect this at all. She sighed and said, send the assassin as a servant. How is that? Vivian replied, the boss also entrusted her with my lady's protection, so from now on, she will be your eyes, ears, and any part you need. She will do whatever my lady orders. Protection, information gathering, intimidation, persuasion, and even assassination are her main specializations. Nadia says, although she doubts it, that she would be in danger in G's lands, but information obtained in the light and in the dark is different, so she trusts that her skills will be useful, for the same reason that Conrad uses the identity of Viscount Odell. Vivian said that she was prepared to face any danger. Nadia said that unfortunately, there was nothing for Vivian yet. For the moment, she can only send her to receive a reward, but anyone can do that. Vivian said that the boss said that many strange things happen around my lady. Nadia replied that it is bad, but nothing can be done. She came here as a servant, or this job is too difficult for her. Then Vivian cheered up and said, Nadia is already tired, although it is easy to talk to Vivian. She is very active, and this can be annoying. Since Vivian didn't know where to start, Nadia showed her the letters and asked her to organize them. She was too busy to deal with them. They are important documents, so she cannot entrust them to the maids. Vivian asked if my lady was dealing with them alone. It seemed there were even more than in Odella. Nadia replied that work had increased lately, and soon there would be even more work. Vivian started working, and Nadia happily thought that now she had a vein. A key and a reliable servant are a good start, so she hopes that everything will go well from now on. Vivian called to Nadia and asked if it looked like an invitation. My lady was checking it. Nadia didn't know about this invitation. Nadia asked where it was from. Vivian replied, from the Baldwin house. Having survived the cold of winter, they welcome the warmer season, and they are renewing their garden. They hope that the lords of the neighboring lands will join them to welcome the new spring with a garden party. Nadia stroked the letter tenderly. That handwriting wasn't Glenn's, but the Grand Duchess Baldwin's. After regaining her health, she used to organize garden parties. She really hasn't changed. Nadia wondered if everything was okay with the Duchess. Vivian asked if my lady would go. Nadia replied no. She still misses the Grand Duchess Baldwin's garden and her warm smile, but she has sworn not to return as Lily Baldwin. Vivian noticed her smile and said she thought it would at least be interesting, since she had decorated the garden and organized a party. But it's a pity that the Baldwins don't appear at all in public circles. Nadia didn't know what Vivian was talking about, so she explained that Duke Baldwin never attended parties, except for those organized by the imperial family, which they don't host parties. Nadia asked, still in shock. Vivian replied, perhaps since Lady Lilia died. About 10 years ago. Then Nadia thought with horror, Glenn had been alone for 10 years. What could this mean? Managing family finances is important. And what's more, Nadia remembered how Glenn used to say that his father was a quiet man, but very polite. He always used to say it, that when he has children, he wants to be a father like his father. Glenn dreamed of a happy family. When Nadia wondered if Glenn really blamed himself for her death, since the accident happened on the way to the academy. He was a sensitive child, so it is very possible that he remained one. And for the same reason, it is possible that he had not remarried. Who more than Nadia can understand Glenn's feelings? She also blames herself for her mother's death, and she knows how unbearable the pain can be. Nadia changed her mind, decided to go to the party, and asked Vivian to hem her dress to go out. Vivian was very happy with this, and immediately started suggesting decoration options and flowers. In fact, Nadia was very worried about Glenn. She wanted to ask him directly why he had stopped appearing in society. Why didn't he marry again? The last question could anger Glenn. The woman stood by the portrait. She said that something serious must have happened if Glenn was asking her to organize a party. Glenn apologized for being so unexpected. The Duchess replied that there was no need to worry, that she was delighted. Many years have passed since the last time they opened their doors to people, and they have already received some responses. Everyone seems to be looking forward to it. It has been about 10 years since the estate held its last party. When Glenn was studying, this girl often walked them around. Glenn immediately became sad. His mother noticed this, and she said that it wasn't boring at all back then. The girl always livened up the estate to please her. Since she let her father die, Lilia tried to do everything possible not to feel alone. Lily was a very lively girl, which is why she was surprised when Glenn asked her to organize a party. Glenn is finally ready to forget her and find someone else. When the Duchess asks her hypersensitive son about it, he froze and got angry. Glenn interrupted his mother and said that his mother was torturing him. She knows better, that his wife would only be Lily, the Duchess asked. And then, why was Glenn asking to be the host of the party? Glenn replied that, because of Lily, the Duchess said it would be really confusing if Duke Baldwin was organizing a party. Everyone will think this is a way to find a bride, but he still says it is for his dead wife. He is still chasing it, and this party is just that, Glenn replied. Yes. The Duchess asked if there were any results. Glenn replied that nothing special, but maybe. Baron Hesse adopted the girl and his wife Lilia. There is information that only they know. If it is not a coincidence, they might find a clue at the party, said Glenn. At the Duke Baldwin estate, the day of the party arrived. Nadia put on her luxurious dress, which was sewn by Vivian. There were many young women who wanted to attend this party, so Vivian did everything possible for Nadia to stand out. Vivian asked if my lady liked the dress. She paid special attention to the shoulders and waist, but perhaps something made her uncomfortable. She was really doing the best she could, which made Nadia happy, so Nadia praised Vivian for her work. Then, full of joy, Vivian ran to cook something for Nadia, in case my lady was hungry. Now that Vivian is gone, Nadia will be able to do what she came to the party to do. Nadia walked among the flowers and thought, how strange. It looks exactly the same as when she planted them 10 years ago. Although no, some things had changed. One of the statues had disappeared. Nadia was looking around the garden. When I heard the girls talking, a long time had passed, but the parties held by the ducal house remained just as magnificent. Of course, Glenn was surrounded by beautiful girls in luxurious dresses. When Nadia looked at him, her heart began to beat faster. She felt it when she saw him near the mine, but Glenn had become so adult, and he looked nothing like the boy she remembered. It seemed that Nadia had not realized she had already been staring at him for a couple of minutes. But Glenn noticed this. Seeing her strange expression, he looked at her questioningly. Then Glenn turned to her. Nadia composed herself and thanked him for the invitation. Glenn asked her if she liked the atmosphere of the party. Nadia replied that she hadn't attended many parties, but this was the most beautiful one. She asked if his lordship had probably attended many parties. Glenn replied not really. Then Nadia began to plan. Nadia asked why his lordship should go all the way there to meet good people. Of course, it would probably be difficult to attend everything, but for the sake of the Baldwin family. And for himself, Glenn interrupted her and said, this is not something a lady should worry about. Nadia was a bit surprised and apologized awkwardly. Because of her discomfort, she started to eat and think. Lilia Baldwin might say something similar, but Nadia Hesse wouldn't. To Glenn, now she is just the daughter of a neighboring baron after trying the nut cake. Nadia was delighted. Glenn asked her if she liked it, and Nadia replied yes, that the nuts are very tasty, and that the soaking is quite sweet. Nadia wanted to keep praising the cake, when suddenly she froze in horror at the meeting. They served food with nuts. Before Glenn could take a bite, Nadia grabbed his hand and shouted, This is nut cake. It seems your husband has a nut allergy, and perhaps this was a test. Glenn replied a bit bewildered, he knows, this party will be held on his own property. She thinks he will eat without knowing what they served him. Nadia, still not moving away, said that is. She thought that perhaps his lordship had been too busy to check. Glenn took a bite, and Nadia got hiccups because she remembers that when Glenn was little, he once ate nuts, and he got terribly sick. He suffered a lot, so nuts were banned on the Baldwin property. Nadia watched with horror as Glenn devoured the cake, in which there were many nuts. Glenn, seeing the expression on Nadia's face, asked if there was any problem. She was surprised that Glenn was fine, so she apologized for making unnecessary noise. And she apologized for her rudeness, but then Glenn asked how the lady found out. Now it will be difficult to get out. Glenn approached Nadia and told her that there was a time when he could not eat nuts. But it was an absolute secret, even within the estate, so few people know about it. So how did she find out? Actually, he wanted to ask something. There was something suspicious, in the sense of the magic stones they had found recently. The records regarding the veins contained information that only his wife knew. Although Nadia had learned it while studying history. Nadia bit her tongue and then Glenn said, "It seems the lady doesn't want to answer now." Glenn told Nadia directly to remember one thing: he would watch her. The situation became too stressful, and Nadia continued to remain silent, saying that something now could come back to haunt her later. How lucky that at that moment, Vivian came running with a bunch of food and saved Nadia from being exposed. Nadia was very happy to see Vivian, so they decided to make a quick getaway, taking advantage of the excuse. She apologized again for being rude and hurried to leave. Glenn could not stop them. That's why he looked at them with a creepy look. This whole situation probably confused him. It seems that Nadia underestimated the knowledge that Glenn had of his wife. Of course, after talking to her, he will be able to recognize her as Lily. While Nadia was scolding herself for her carelessness, Vivian noticed that a man was talking actively about something, and she said that this guy still hadn't learned his lesson. Nadia also paid attention to him and asked who he was. Vivian explained that it was Royce, an art con artist who had been discovered defrauding other nobles, and she heard that he was released for lack of evidence. He pretended not to know they were fakes when he sold them. He even escaped during the trial, and a reward was offered for his head. But apparently, even that was pushed to the background. What audacity to have carried out such a scam in the middle of the Baldwin party. Suddenly, Nadia heard that if they bought that painting, even the Baldwin family would begin to admire them. This work of art cannot be bought with money alone. Now that the Baldwin family has been targeted by a con artist, Nadia couldn't stay on the sidelines, so the con artist continued saying nonsense. She approached him and asked if she could look at the painting too. It is a work that is said to rival even the fame of the Baldwin family. She was curious about it. The con artist began to look at Nadia and then said he doesn't want to offend her, but that painting is very valuable. She understands. It's not the type of work that a young woman like her can buy. Then Nadia looked meekly at Vivian and understood with a single glance what my lady wanted from her. Vivian said playfully, "My lady, of course, you earn some money, but you cannot spend it like that." Nadia also said playfully that it was just a picture. Everything was fine. They were additional funds she received thanks to the mine. Then the con artist intervened and said that nothing could be done, that he had no intention of showing it to her. But apparently, she was a reliable person. With her he would make an exception, but he himself thought it seemed that she had become rich. Thanks to luck, there was nothing easier than deceiving a newly rich woman. The con artist was weaving. She would be surprised when she heard this. She knows what she has, thought Nadia, of all the possible ones, to bring this particular painting. She said she couldn't even imagine it. It seemed to her that that painting had disappeared many years ago. The thief said that some paintings were difficult to find, but there was none he couldn't get. Nadia said she would buy that painting. Then the con artist said surprised, but she hadn't even seen it. Nadia said it was a rare painting, so she had to buy it. She wanted to sign the contract immediately. The con artist happily went to get the document and said he would come with it soon. As he ran away, he thought, "I knew that newbies are easy to deceive. They are so stupid." Nadia and Vivian led him by the nose. A little later, the con artist arrived with a document and found Nadia, who was talking pleasantly with someone. He called her, but it turned out that Nadia hadn't promised it to just anyone, but to Lady Baldwin. Nadia said she arrived on time and that Lady Baldwin will accept this gift that they gave her from the bottom of their heart. The Duchess said she was wondering what work of art Lady Hesse would gift her. Now the rogue's hands began to shake. Then he said they hadn't even seen the painting nor signed the contract. Wasn't it too hasty to present it as a gift to Lady Baldwin? Nadia said she was very happy because she would soon receive the imperial bird. The painting's title made the Duchess stop the conversation. She interrupted them and asked, "Lady Hesse talks about the work, Pamela's imperial bird." Nadia replied, "True." As soon as Viscount Royce said he had found it, she immediately expressed her desire to buy it. The con artist became more and more nervous. He knew he would be caught red-handed, so he tried to dissuade them. But Vivian snatched the document from his hands. The Duchess's face changed noticeably. She was very angry to leave things as they were. It was not in her nature. She approached Royce and asked him where and how Viscount Royce had found that painting that had been lost. About 100 years ago, the con artist hesitated, but said, through a friend, why was she asking? The Duchess replied that recently there has been an increase in art fraud. It affects both nobles and commoners, and she hopes that Viscount Royce is not involved. Royce swallowed hard and said that the Duchess was scaring him with her jokes, that he was no con artist. How could she even think of defrauding the Baldwin family? The Duchess said, and was truly offended that he had thought of that. She called the guards and ordered them to tie him up immediately. Then the con artist started shouting, "What are you saying? How can you suspect him of this without proof? Even if you are aristocrats with a high title, you cannot lock up an innocent person like that." Suddenly the calm Duchess shouted, "Silence. He says he is selling the imperial bird. How shameless, the original imperial bird. From the beginning, they have kept it in their residence, to show you the picture so you understand his deception." The con artist said that it was not possible, that how could a painting be found that no one had managed to find before? Nadia acted, pretended sadness and falling to the ground. She said how could the Viscount have deceived her? The staging worked, people noticed, and all the guests began to talk about the con artist. This time he will not get away with it. The guards took the thief from the party. Vivian whispered to Nadia that it was enough, and Nadia stopped crying instantly. The Duchess apologized for the situation. Nadia said she should thank her for her help. Glenn called his mother and told her he came because he heard a noble causing a disturbance. What happened is that Nadia was apparently not very happy about her next encounter with Glenn. The Duchess said she hoped not to see him again today. Lady Hesse was almost deceived by Viscount Royce. Glenn said, rather unpleasantly, though glad it was resolved calmly, he spoke kindly. But his gaze was creepy. He said he would take care of the rest, so that Mom could go back to rest. And he will accompany Lady Hesse. Glenn reached out his hand, and Nadia took it hesitantly. In front of the carriage, Glenn thanked Nadia for revealing the con artist's deception. She said it wasn't her, but his mother. Glenn replied that if it weren't for her, they wouldn't have discovered it. Besides, he was surprised that even a girl as intelligent as her almost fell for the deception. Nadia said it was her fault for believing the Viscount when she hadn't even seen the painting. Even if she saw it, she wouldn't be able to tell if it was a forgery or an original. She simply thought it was a cute picture of beautiful lovers. Glenn said he would definitely thank her again later. He asked to be invited to the Hesse estate someday. Nadia clearly didn't want this, but said yes as soon as possible. It seemed it was the first time they held hands under Nadia's disguise. Vivian called to Nadia and asked what she would do if Lady Baldwin didn't have the original painting. Nadia said she already knew the painting existed. Vivian asked her if it was real and where it came from, but Nadia said it was a secret. Lilia couldn't help but know, because she was the one who found it 10 years ago. She still doesn't understand why Glenn doesn't want to remarry, although it makes sense. Nadia was proud of her action. The criminals who try to commit fraud using the Baldwin family name will suffer and pay for their crimes. It seems the Baldwin family is still very close to Nadia's heart. Allison asked if the gentleman had achieved what he wanted from the party. Glenn replied even more. Lady Hesse knew about your nut allergy, said Allison. It is a top secret even on the estate. Besides, the master no longer has that allergy, replied Glenn. That's right, I don't have it anymore. But it seems she doesn't know that. However, as expected, Nadia was careless again and revealed herself. After all, only Troy knew about the imperial bird, strictly guarded and located on the Baldwin estate. It made no sense for her to describe the scene in front of him. Glenn still didn't understand how she had discovered the mine that only Lily knew about. He wondered if it was a coincidence, but now he is sure there is something between Lily and Lady Hesse that he doesn't know about. Allison said the Duke thought it would be better to ask Lady Hesse directly how she knew these things. Glenn replied, who knows, even if it's not today, the opportunity will arise soon. He decided to see Nadia again. They are getting closer and closer, even though Glenn doesn't admit it. At the Baron Hesse estate, Nadia was reading something. She seemed to be in a very good mood. Vivian asked if it was a letter from the Duke's residence, what was written there. Nadia replied that it was about a con artist, the one they caught at the party. Viscount Royce's compensation will arrive soon. It also says she shouldn't worry anymore. If something weighed on her soul, as expected, his lordship was really a kind man. Vivian suspected. She said he could have simply written about the result, but that he was also worried about her feelings. And she smiled as if she had received a love letter. It's possible that at this rate they will get married. Nadia replied that it couldn't be. Nadia stroked Glenn's letter so tenderly that Vivian thought she definitely didn't like him romantically. And yet, it seems there is something more. Is she sure the lady understands what she is doing? The people continued working diligently. Nadia also went to them. Nadia said that this store pays more. That's why it's worth trading here, said the Baron. Fine, she will remember it. Then Nadia asked what the Baron thought about buying magic lamps and installing them in every mine. This will make the work safer, and that they now have to interact with other lands more often. The Baron should also think about maintaining his noble dignity, said the Baron. He received such a large sum, and at first he panicked and had no idea what to do. Nadia was really smart, unlike him. He is really happy to have her. The Baron is completely different from Lilia's unpleasant father. When she was Lily, her father always looked at her with disdain when she spoke. Although she is not his true daughter, her father always respects what Nadia says. It's nice to have a father who really loves his child, no matter what happens, with compensation. And money. With the money they received for the magic stones, they will be able to buy medicine for her mother this month. From now on, Nadia decided to work harder for her dear family and her estate because they were wonderful people. Who loves her as much as she loves them? When Nadia got home, she was greeted by Baron Barden. The Baron said the baby had grown up and become a beautiful lady. Nadia said awkwardly that it had been a long time. Then Dad came down and asked what brought him there. Then the Baron smiled and said, "This miser dresses so beautifully and lives well," replied the Baron. Yes, he is still the same. Instead of staying outside, maybe they should go in and have a cup of tea. The Baron said it was a good idea. He had many things to tell them. When they went in, Nadia noticed his shoes were covered in dirt, suspiciously. Vivian thanked Nadia for her effort and asked her who Nadia was. She replied that her father considered him an old friend. However, Nadia doubts the Baron thinks the same. He only comes when he wants to ask her father to invest money. And a kind-hearted father can never refuse. That's why her father lost so much money that Vivian asked her if she should throw him out right now. Nadia said that if they threw him out now, they would damage his reputation and her father's pride. So for now they would see how things went. She asked to leave it on the windowsill of the living room where her father was. Listening device, she once gave Conrad a magic stone from the Jess mine. And he did it. Vivian laughed and said, "The boss really adores my lady." When she finished speaking, Vivian skillfully jumped to the second floor of the building so that no one could eavesdrop on the conversation between her father and the Baron. The Baron said how lucky. Who would have thought that magic stones would suddenly be found on this land? Maybe fortune favors people who live carefree lives like him, instead of those who are always busy. Maybe fate hadn't completely abandoned people yet. Dad asked what the Baron meant. "It seems Dad doesn't understand the hint," said the Baron. "Well, since the friend's fortune grows day by day, how about we increase it?" He developed a business plan and will only tell his dear friend about it. In the far north, deep in the mountains, among the strong winds and the cold, a fruit grows. Some call it the northern fruit. It grows only on this mountain, very rarely, and they say it can cure everything. If he finds it, his wife will be able to be cured of her illness. Dad asked if this fruit could help stop his wife's suffering. The Baron lied vilely for him to believe him. He wouldn't lie to his friend. Nadia, eavesdropping, said that perhaps he isn't lying, but he always hides his true intentions. Starting a business with a fruit he has never tasted, or even seen, makes no sense. Dad said he appreciated his friend's offer, and Nadia thought maybe she should stop him again. She immediately got up and decided to enter the room and intervene before Dad agreed to something bad. But before Nadia had time to close the door, she heard her father say that this time he would refuse. It seems no one expected this. The con artist's face is now priceless. He asked in shock what he said. Dad responded to his offer. He says he refuses it. Nadia can be proud of her dad. A little earlier, Nadia talked to her father, and he surprised her by asking her to teach him how to refuse. It turns out he himself understands that sometimes it's worth refusing, but he can't do it. They have had too many problems all this time because of this trait of his. Not like that. So Dad was worried about what had happened in the past all this time. Said Nadia, perhaps because Dad says things that are not usual for him, he starts to get nervous, causing the words to get stuck in his throat. Then maybe we should try this. Nadia simply raised her cup. Dad didn't understand anything. Then I asked her what she meant, and Nadia explained that first I needed to take a small sip of tea. This will help him calm down. Afterwards, you have to adopt a comfortable position and think in your head what you want to say. And then speak with a kind smile. Say that you appreciate the offer but want to decline it. Dad learned the lesson well. His daughter can be proud of her dad. He did everything perfectly and also refused perfectly. The Baron murmured the reason, and Dad replied that all the business plans he had invested in had ended up failing. He is not trying to blame him, but he realized that his friend has no talent for business. The Baron said that business was based on luck, and that this time he could be lucky. But Dad said he was tired of investing in an uncertain future, and he apologizes, but it's better for his friend to leave. Upon hearing this, Nadia's face changed drastically. Then she immediately ran out of the room and called Vivian and whispered something to her. She heard a loud noise. She hoped nothing would happen to her father. Vivian replied, "Yes, it's fine, so there's no need to worry." Much more importantly, Vivian opened the door a little and Nadia approached to take a look. It turns out the Baron fell to his knees, which terribly scared Dad. He asked what Brandon was doing. Then the Baron shouted. He had already invested a lot of money in northern fruits. But the bandit stole it all before arriving at the Empire. He promises him that he will make a profit and will pay him double, no, triple. He went down and begged him to help him. The Baron made a fortune from this vein of magic stones. The girls didn't try to intervene in the conversation. Dad asked the Baron to lift his head, and he immediately said he knew his friend would help him. He apologized and explained that it would be difficult. He didn't have that much money. The Baron asked him what he meant, and that money was for the stones. Dad replied that it wasn't his money. His daughter had found the magic stones, and since many had participated in their extraction, that money belonged to the GESS estate. Still, Dad is an incredible man, shouted the Baron. That's true, but it's not his money. He is the owner of this property. Dad replied that if he helped him with money, he would just be pretending to be a good person. He cannot receive help from his daughter forever. He wants to become a responsible person. This moved Nadia. Her father is a wonderful father, husband, and Baron. People are very lucky to have him. As the pleas didn't work, the Baron decided to change tactics. This is what he means. That his old friend's request is not that important to him. As for what his daughter will think of him, it's good that he doesn't understand it at all. She wasn't even his true daughter. There was no point in saying it. The Baron had crossed the line, but he didn't plan to stop there. He shouted that it wasn't shameful to be a noble aristocrat. He just had to marry her off so he could pay for her education. If he presents a good option, he will seriously consider his proposal. There's old Count Iris. He's 70 years old, so he doesn't have much time left. He's not perfect. The Baron turned out to be much viler than he seemed at first glance. Insignificant and vile, he made his father angry, and he started throwing everything he could at him. Too bad he didn't throw anything heavy at him. Dad shouted, "How dare he pair his daughter with this world-famous old effeminate man? He is simply ashamed of having ever considered Brandon a friend. He should leave his estate." Dad kicked the monster, and Vivian was visibly delighted with what she saw. If the Baron hadn't left on his own, Nadia would have asked Vivian to throw him out of there. But Dad not only refused, but also ordered him to leave. Nadia must be incredibly proud of him. Her father defended his daughter's honor and happiness. She entered, and Dad asked her how long she had been standing there. Nadia replied that not that long. She heard a loud noise. So they went down. Dad said that she is his daughter, that they will never force her to do something she doesn't like, so she can be calm. He asks her to wait a little, and that her father will do his part. This is the second time in a long time. When she heard this, Glenn asked her to wait a little, that she would grow quickly, and she would never have to work in her life again. These words gave Nadia strength. Nadia said she would like to tell her father something. Probably, he was already used to his duties as a teacher. If Dad is ready, how about we take charge of the mining business? Dad was surprised, and he asked if he could do it himself. Nadia replied that of course, that she was sure he would do a good job. While her father runs the mining business, she will focus on earning money to pay for her mother's medicine. Now that I think about it, the reward she got for the key was significant. Maybe she should try to earn more with Conrad. Vivian came running, and Nadia asked when she arrived. Vivian replied that it wasn't that important. "We must leave immediately. The young Master Baldwin is here. Well, spring is in bloom, and the feelings of the young." It seems Nadia didn't expect Glenn to appear at her door so soon. When she went out, she saw Glenn standing under a tree. He seems to be posing. Maybe he wants to look good for her. Glenn said that they met again and that, as if he hadn't personally gone to her house. He plans to discover her true identity. They went in and sat at the table, but Glenn didn't touch his cup of tea, so Nadia asked. Duke Gillen doesn't like tea, and she thought he didn't like strong flavors, so she prepared something lighter. Glenn frowned again and stared at Nadia, but she said nothing. Finally, Glenn asked if young Miss Hess apparently knew a lot about him. Nadia replied that he was the Duke of the North. Any aristocrat from that region would know him, but that didn't convince Glenn, who said it was strange. The location of the magic stone vein and his nut allergy are not things that many people would know. And that's not the only suspicious part, the imperial bird. When Lady Hess saw this image, Nadia replied that she didn't understand what the Duke was talking about, that she had never seen the painting. But Nadia didn't have time to finish. Glenn interrupted her by telling her there was no need to lie. Then Glenn became even sadder and began to explain that when someone hears about the imperial bird, they expect a bird to be depicted there. But Lady Nadia already knew that it was a painting about lovers, and so it was at the end of the party. Nadia praised this painting, but the only people who saw the painting were his mother, him, and his wife Lilia. Nadia found herself in an unpleasant situation again and didn't know how to answer him, and the atmosphere became increasingly difficult. Glenn continued. No matter what excuse the lady came up with, she would have to say something that he would accept, especially if it concerns his wife, then how she obtained information that only Lilia knew. What on earth is the relationship between them? Glenn ordered Nadia to answer. What a terrible face she had now. It was time to lie, Nadia said. Since he had come so far, she had no choice. Okay, she would say it. The truth is that she knew the Duchess. Glenn was so surprised. It seems he is still a sensitive boy. And Nadia lied before being adopted by the Hess family. She was once almost kidnapped by a loan shark. The Duchess was nearby and saved her, after which the Duchess visited her frequently, and she told different stories about the world. The one about the imperial bird was one of those stories. Then suddenly, she stopped coming, and after doing her research, she suddenly learned of Lady Lily's death. And now she finally met the Duke, about whom she had only heard before. His lordship was offended. She asks for forgiveness. She didn't want to hurt him. She only wanted to help because Lady Lily loved him very much. Glenn laughed tiredly. He seemed so tired. With a melancholic smile, he said, Lily really loved telling stories. Then he stood up and said he understood the situation, but asked that they stop prying into his wife's past. And there is no need to try to imitate her again. She is not someone you can just copy, and now he is leaving. Glenn headed towards the exit, but it seemed Nadia wasn't going to let him go like that. After all, Glenn looked so sad that even Nadia wondered why. 10 years had already passed. Every time Glenn thinks about his past life, why does he look so sad and hurt? Although it seemed he couldn't breathe, she said the Duchess didn't die because of the Duke. Glenn stopped in front of the door and asked her what she had said. Nadia replied that it was a terrible accident that no one wanted. Therefore, it's worth stopping living in the past and start paying attention to the present. And the future. No one blames the Duke, said Nadia, knowing very well who Glenn was. Little Glenn asked if his lady was happy there. Now Nadia answered Glenn. She was sure that the Duchess wanted the Duke to be happy. Glenn, who was too sensitive, couldn't handle it because Nadia touched a sensitive topic. He held a sword out to Nadia and asked her what she knew. How dared someone like her? It was probably the first time Nadia saw him like that. It was clear from his face that she had never seen Glenn so angry before. In a creepy voice, Glenn said she pretended to be his wife and now wants to address him as her. No one can replace Lily. Glenn has a terribly sad expression on his face right now. Seeing Glenn like that, Nadia wanted to cry and whispered his name softly. Glenn returned the sword to its sheath and warned Nadia not to cross the line again. Nadia didn't stay quiet. She spoke, but even so, she hopes his lordship doesn't suffer anymore. Glenn didn't answer. As he walked down the empty hallways, he thought, that's why he saw traces of Lily in this woman. Just imagining that he was deceived by a simple farce is a waste of time. Glenn stopped abruptly when he remembered Nadia's last words. Then he said she was being funny. It just calmed him down. When Glenn left, Nadia called Conrad and told him that Glenn had come today. And seeing the expression on his face, she found herself remembering something she had abandoned a long time ago. The events of that day. She wants Conrad to answer her honestly. The accident that killed her was not a simple accident. Conrad replied sadly, she has foresight. Nadia said, it means Conrad was investigating something. Let him explain. And Conrad replied that yes, there were two types of mud on the wheels of the broken carriage. The unusually wet mud wasn't from that road. It seems someone put it there on purpose, and the wheel supports were a bit loose. It's hard to believe it was just an accident. This means Lily died according to someone's plan. If it was intentional, then they weren't targeting Lily. And instead, the Duchess Baldwin, someone wanted to take her place. And these people would have succeeded if Glenn hadn't been such a sensitive boy. It's strange that the Duke didn't manage to find the criminals. By his connections, if the Duchess was a monstrosity to someone, that was Count Karamzin. The Count's family lives to the southwest, and for many generations they were loyal vassals of the duchy, branches close enough to marry. If it wasn't for Lily, Glenn probably would have married the Count's daughter when he was an adult. Conrad confirmed that it was totally possible. In fact, there was talk of a remarriage between the two houses. Nadia ordered to first find out everything possible about Count Karamzin. They had to find the culprit of her death. Maybe then they would alleviate Glenn's feelings of guilt. Nadia silently asked Glenn to wait a little. She cannot be by his side like Lily, but she will look after his happiness from afar until the end. Conrad accepted the order and promised to do everything possible for his lady. In the morning, Nadia was working hard with a mountain of documents. She seemed very focused. Until that moment, she heard a noise outside the window. Then she decided to check everything herself. Nadia looked out the window and asked what Uncle Paul was doing. The man replied that the inhabitants of the lands had collected some money. They are going to build her a new office. They will furnish it very well, so they apologize for the noise. Suddenly, Mom arrived and said, "They are not ungrateful people. They said they wanted to give her a small gift." So they gathered early in the morning. Nadia asked if her mother found it difficult to walk. Her mother replied that it wasn't difficult for her to take a short walk. Thanks to the medicines Nadia gave her, she felt better and also wants to talk to her about something. Nadia asked if something had happened. Her mother called Nadia. Her tone surprised Nadia a little. Furthermore, the mother also asked her how Nadia's debut would be this year. Thanks to Nadia, their lands had more money, so she thought they should do it first. The debutante ball is held once a year by the imperial family, where all the daughters of noble families gather for the celebration. This usually happens when a girl turns 19. It reminds me of a market with prices. Nadia is 20. Nadia said she wasn't very interested in social events. Her mother replied that interest wasn't a problem. She also debuted late, at 21, because her family was poor and the younger girls looked down on her. They called her a girl without money, without honor, and without youth, dirty society with dirty people. Mom said she had never been ashamed of being poor, but that day she felt terribly lonely. That's why, more than anything, she doesn't want her daughter to share the same pain. Nadia understands her mother's feelings, but she had no desire to visit that market, which is called a ball, so her mother took Nadia by the hand, and she said she needed to set aside her domestic affairs for a while. The worries of the Hess house weren't just hers. That way Nadia doesn't have to deal with them alone, because Nadia can trust them a little more. Her father, although shy, is now starting to enjoy his work, as his wife sees. Nadia coped with her role quite well, so that she became reliable and even gained courage. Then comes the responsibility to the people of the lands Nadia. She cannot take care of everything alone. At that moment, a man entered the room and said, "The lady is the daughter of a baron's family. It will be useful for her to be a debutante, and 20 years old is the most appropriate age for this. When new workers arrive, they will train them well, so she doesn't have to worry about the mines," whispered Vivian. In fact, this is an ideal opportunity. The boss contacted her and informed her that the Count's daughter was also involved, a young woman who was rumored to have intentions of marrying Glenn. For some reason, it was important to everyone that Nadia go to that market with people. And Nadia agreed. But since she will be in the capital for some time, she asks her to make sure to communicate with her if something happens. Of course, Dad was worried about his daughter and asked if both of them could handle such a long trip. If she needed more help, Nadia would interrupt him and tell him that Vivian was enough. The carriage stopped, and out stepped the Viscount of Odeley. Of course it was Conrad in disguise. Vivian stared at her boss's new hairstyle. Nadia said awkwardly that, since she would be traveling with Viscount Odell, her father shouldn't worry. Conrad said that he would faithfully serve the young lady until arriving at the capital, and the dad asked him to take care of his daughter. Before getting into the carriage, Nadia noticed some kind of glow. Then Nadia asked, "What is this light, Vivian?" Vivian looked in the same direction and asked what my lady was talking about. Then Nadia asked if Vivian could see the glow around the horses, or if Conrad had cast some kind of special spell, or something like that. The people came to say goodbye to their lady. They told her to have a good time in the capital. They wanted to bring home a handsome boyfriend, but not just anyone, and for her to have a safe trip. Surely Nadia was happy with the love of her people. They were a grateful people. When they moved a bit further away, Nadia became more serious and said that Vivian had told her everything. Count Karamzin's daughter will also participate. Then the count will also arrive in the capital, replied Conrad. Yes, that is correct. Nadia said, great. With her current status, she cannot meet the count directly. So this is an ideal opportunity. Will she be able to get close to his daughter? Nadia asked. He finished checking his background. Conrad replied yes. But Conrad became more pessimistic and said that his lady said she no longer wanted to live like Lilia. And to do this, the first thing she needs to do is get rid of Duke Baldwin in her life. She is a new person to him, but she still cares about his well-being and safety. The meeting with young Karamzin has the same purpose. He is no longer a child for whom she can worry. Nadia laughed and said, of course, Glenn is already 26 years old, and yet, it's not just for Glenn. She is also doing it for herself, because when she looked at that boy, she made a promise to herself. Nadia remembered the past. When she was sick, little Glenn took care of her and people whispered. Duke Baldwin had a wife, a young lady from a count's family of little note. She was lucky to take the place of the Duchess. If they wanted someone from the count's family, they should have considered the Karamzin family. The Baldwin duchy didn't marry him simply because they needed someone to act as a confidant. When the Duke grows up, most likely they will divorce. It's a pity for the current Duke. He could have had a better girlfriend. All those nasty words circulated around Lily. Glenn addressed Lily as his wife, noticed she was feeling unwell, and called her to ask if she was okay. Lily barely got up and asked where she was. Glenn replied that this was her room, that she shouldn't get up yet. Then he asks her to lie down, and the doctor says she fainted from overwork. So the wife needs to rest properly. Lily asked Glenn not to do that next time. Glenn asked surprised why not. Lily replied that even though they were married, they couldn't be close in front of others. They will think she controls the duchy through him, and it's understandable that they will start to look down on him. And they will say the Duke is an incompetent Duke who hid under his wife's skirt. Little Glenn said, but if the wife is sick, the husband must stay close. He believed that is what busy couples do. It seems little Glenn understands how marriage works more than adult men. Glenn lowered his head like a sad kitten. And still, Lily got out of bed and said that, for the sake of his authority, they should keep their distance. She would return to her room. The sad kitten said, yes, good night, wife. It seems Lily wants to keep a distance between them, because she believes. With these rumors that Glenn would marry again when he grew up, Glenn believed that. As Duke Baldwin, he shouldn't show weakness. If one day he achieves unbreakable authority, he will then be able to approach his wife with confidence. New rumors started to circulate. People had nothing better to do than spread rumors. They said things were disappearing from the house. Since the Duke was selling them in secret, the previous Duke's dagger had disappeared. The girl asked why he would do that. The second replied that he was probably trying to raise money so the Duchess wouldn't find out. Lily heard all this and thought he had never told her he needed money. He was hiding it because she might find out. She came out from the corner, thus scaring the maids. Lily ordered them to tell the Duke she wanted to have a cup of tea with him on the terrace. The boy was probably confused, but happy about it. Lily apologized because the cadet was his moment, when he should be busy. As expected, the baby was very happy. He said that finding time for his wife is a husband's duty. Glenn should be taught lessons on how to be a good husband for all men. But Lily, on the contrary, was sad. She asked him if the Duke had recently needed a large sum of money, and Glenn became visibly nervous. And Lily continued, in fact, she heard rumors that the Duke was selling things from the house. To save money in secret, could the Duke tell her the truth? If he doesn't have enough money, she can give it to him at any time. Glenn said timidly that he understood his wife was worried about him, but it seemed only Glenn took their marriage seriously. Only that he calls her his wife, asked Lily. This is partly true, but the Duke blushed. Everything is fine with him. Glenn replied that it was fine, that there was no need to worry, but that he wasn't sure where or from whom he had heard it. But the rumors that he was collecting money in secret were not true. Asked Lily, so the Duke spread them deliberately. Glenn replied yes. Since he was little, no one suspected him. Lily then asked why he did it. And Glenn replied, his wife said that if they were close, then others wouldn't value him at all. Then she wondered who those others could be, whether servants or people from the imperial palace. If people from outside the complex can judge his power based on internal affairs, then someone is leaking information from here. So she fed each of the suspicious maids with false rumors, so that when the rumor spread, he could determine where it started. All this is done only to determine which people in the duchy can be trusted, and which ones cannot. He did it on purpose, said Lilia, which means he intends to get rid of unwanted servants. Why does he go to such extremes? Glenn replied awkwardly. It's for his wife, because he wants to be a husband who remains confident. He will stop anyone who ignores her or treats his wife badly. Even if it's a little, he still wants to protect his wife from those stares. Glenn really needs to receive lessons. Lily thanked him and said it was wise of him to think of such a plan. However, there are also some drawbacks. Not all suspicious maids will fall for his tricks, so it's hard to say this is a perfect plan, and those who realize the trick will start lying. She teased Glenn and then watched him with an amused face. After recomposing himself, he said, of course, we have to deal with those who are not loyal. In the end, he did what he thought was best for Baldwin. Lily said that since he had tried so hard, she would reward him, which was what the Duke wanted. Little Glenn immediately imagined romantic scenes and finally said dancing. He asks her to teach him to dance, and Glenn seems very excited. Lily didn't expect this and asked if she could ask why. Glenn explained that he was still young, so he couldn't be with her during her debut. Be that as it may, he wants his wife's first dance to be with him. Glenn asked timidly if that was impossible while extending his hand. The hand is smaller than hers. The boy looks more like a younger brother than a husband. However, the first person who addressed her with such sincerity was this very child. That was when Lilia first thought that she wanted to be on good terms with someone in the future. Even if their paths diverged, she hopes they remain friends. And so it was, said Nadia, as expected, that she cannot ignore this baby, because she promised herself that she would make Glenn happy, even if Conrad helped her. Conrad replied, yes, Lady Nadia. And yet, Nadia forgets something. Glenn is no longer a little boy, but an adult man. It all begins. Nadia discovers the cause of the death at any cost, and she will free Glenn from the guilt that has tormented him for so long. The beautiful lady looked with joy at the vibrant streets of the capital. She said that the winner this time will be a golden rose. Yes. The boy next to her replied that he thought the other horse would win, so the girl suggested making a bet. Vivian asked if this was Yuri Karamzin's lady. Conrad replied that yes, she looks exactly like in the portrait. Nadia also watched her and thought that, from the outside, she looked like a normal young lady, and energetic, and Conrad said terrible things about her, that Yuri loves luxury and gambling. And there is also a strange rumor about the young groom. There are rumors circulating when talking about a wedding with the Baldwin family, but rumors are rumors. Nadia said that if she is really that troublesome, she wants to see her in person and confirm it. Perhaps since she likes strong emotions, upon arriving in the capital, it is most likely she will go to the races. But what kind of man is this who is by her side? Nadia heard that Lady Karamzin has many friends of the opposite sex. Nadia decided that this could be her lover. Suddenly, the girl approached and asked if the lady had chosen which horse to bet on. Conrad asked, since they were there anyway, why not choose one? Then Nadia said that even if she tried, she still didn't know which horse was good. Suddenly, she noticed a familiar glow on the horse and decided to choose it so she could more easily meet Lady Karamzin. This light caught her attention, so Nadia chose that horse. Nadia told the girl this, and the girl asked if she was talking about the Great Raven. They wanted to dissuade her because the horse was still inexperienced, so its chances were slim. Vivian also said it would be better to choose another horse. This caught Yuria's attention, and Nadia stood firm. She said she was betting that it would be so, she thought, if what she saw was not a mistake, which means the Great Raven will win. The race started, and immediately after the gate, 2 horses quickly took the lead, followed by Steel Scales, with the Golden Rose taking the lead. Soon they will enter the first turn, while the Rose is ahead. The Great Raven is lagging behind from the start. Vivian asked, since it was the first time the lady attended the races, it would be fine if she lost. Yuria was excited when her horse won, and Nadia thought how strange. This light definitely seemed strange. As expected, the main character's horse advanced magically. Well, in a very unexpected turn, the Great Raven moves to the inner track, and in the blink of an eye, it moved directly to 4th place. Nadia was not wrong about the other world. The Steel Scales hold their position, but their speed decreases little by little, and with their last impulse, the great raven takes second place. The great raven keeps pushing. This is the final stretch. Now Yuria's and Nadia's horses are competing against each other. The golden forest is accelerating. They will practically be mane to mane. A fierce battle, 100 meters from the finish, they cross the finish line. The horse that surprised everyone and achieved the long-awaited victory. What a surprise, the protagonist won when he had no chance. While Vivian rejoiced at Nadia's victory, Nadia herself waited for Yuria. And the moment came, Yuria ran and asked Nadia to wait for her. The poor thing was all sweaty. Yuria asked Nadia if she would give her some time. Everything is as Nadia had planned. Nadia stopped and said, of course. What interested the lady was that Yuri asked her how the lady knew that the great raven would win. She suggested, my lady, that you were a mage, right? Nadia didn't understand anything. Yuria replied that she had already asked Ari, and he had said the great raven had mana. The boy quickly ran over and asked Yuria not to run away like that. She should be more careful when outside the estate. Yuria said she was going to go back. Ari replied, liar. If he hadn't gone looking for her, she would have disappeared again. They argued as if they were old acquaintances. The man finally took off his hat and said he was Archie Blanche of the ducal house of Blanche. Nice to meet you. Yuria also introduced herself. So, the man next to her was from the Blanche family, and he asked Yuri to go back. Yuria wanted to talk to Nadia a little more, so Blanche suggested inviting Nadia for tea. And Yuria liked this idea very much and invited Nadia to her house. Nadia, of course, was happy that she had achieved her plan and accepted. Everything happened faster than expected. Nadia said that her business there was finished and they could leave. And a man approached Conrad, dressed in a completely invisible raincoat, on a hot day, and whispered. A report arrived from the subordinates who were tracking objects for which a reward had been assigned. The name the boy gave surprised Conrad. Another spoke in the wheels of our little Glen. Of course, Conrad couldn't remain in the shadows for long. Since Conrad was Lilia's right-hand man, it would be strange if Glenn didn't find the connection. Allison entered and said he had brought a new, prepared medication for the migraine. He was told it worked better than the previous one. Glenn drank, and Allison looked at him melancholically, and finally asked, well, Glenn asked what it was. Allison replied, Count Philin came to visit maybe. You won't see him today, replied Glenn. It's high time for him to appear. Glenn allowed the Count to enter. I wonder why Glenn called Lilia's father. The Count said with a malicious smile that the Duke must be busy since he hadn't appeared anywhere. He was passing by and decided to take a look. Glenn didn't particularly please the Count with his smile. The Count noticed this and said, still with a malicious smile, that it bothered him a bit. Apparently the Baldwin family held a party recently, so how could the Duke forget them? But it's all fine. Lily is no longer with them, so the Duke must be uncomfortable with them. He understands everything. What an insolent man. Glenn remained silent, and the nasty guy said, of course, he was interested. He heard that the garden his daughter cultivated was updated recently, so speaking of that, he discussed it with his wife. And they think it's worth cultivating a small garden on his property, Glenn asked. And what is the point of that? Tip replied that his daughter didn't like gardens. He was even going to plant the roses that Lily loved. But it turned out that a garden needs more than just flowers. It also needs some trees to maintain balance, and walking paths, and imagine how beautiful it will be there with a fountain along the alley. If he wants to drink tea while thinking about Lily, he will also need a table. And of course, a gardener will take care of the garden, but he will only have enough money to prepare the land. Glenn froze. Although he expected this, he said, he knows the Count needs money. But even so, the Count refused to plant the garden when Lily was alive because it was too expensive. And now he uses it as an excuse. Isn't it absurd? Replied the guy. His situation was difficult back then. He couldn't properly take care of his daughter. His poor daughter married a stable boy and sacrificed herself. For the sake of her family, and for 8 years, what a cruel fate awaits her. This nasty guy knew how to pressure Glenn. He tormented him, and in the end, having achieved his goal, Glenn couldn't take it and asked Allison to prepare the money. The nasty guy immediately smiled and declared that his daughter would definitely be happy in heaven. Having got what he wanted, the guy decided to leave, but Glenn said, but there is one thing that must be said. Lily's favorite flower was not a rose, but baby's breath. Glenn looked at the guy with disgust. That look made the vile guy feel uncomfortable, and he hurried to leave. It's unclear why the Duke continues to help these vile guys. He really doesn't know how they tortured Lilia. Allison said, while the young master continued to follow his example. Count Fillin's greed never ceases. He keeps demanding money for implausible reasons. Glenn replied he knows, but he has no choice. No matter how disgusting he is his late wife's father. He began calling Lilia his late wife, no longer just his wife. Glenn believed that taking care of Lilia's family was all he could do. Glenn asked what was happening with the case, and Allison replied that his suspicions were correct. Conrad started acting again, even using a fake ID. Glenn asked if there was anything else unusual, and Allison replied. It seems Conrad didn't care, and went to the Capitol with Lady Nadia Hess. Of course, this couldn't help but surprise Glenn. Nadia appeared in his case again. Allison said, and regarding the particular task the Duke had entrusted him with, the message apparently reached his ears successfully. They should have an answer soon. Said Glenn, Allison can leave. But before leaving, Allison stopped and advised reducing the medication dosage. Glenn replied wearily. Of course, he would keep it in mind. It seems he is starting to have health problems. It was late at night, and Glenn was still sitting at his desk, thinking about Conrad's case. It turned out that Glenn knew perfectly well that Conrad was his wife's only right-hand man. Conrad served Lilia alone, so much so that even Glenn had difficulty seeing his face. After the accident, Conrad disappeared completely. Why did he appear now after so many years? And Nadia Hess, why is Conrad with this particular girl? Glenn thought about this for a long time. In the blink of an eye, the window opened, and Conrad appeared in front of Glenn with a cloak. Glenn asked who he was and how he had gotten there. Then Conrad took off his hood and asked, was it the Duke who was desperately looking for him? No, Glenn clearly didn't expect it to be the one he was looking for. Standing in front of him, it didn't seem that Glenn had good feelings towards Conrad. Conrad asked what the Duke was planning, why he was meddling in his affairs, and forcing him to look for him. Glenn replied that the problem was that after his wife's death, Conrad simply disappeared. At that time, he didn't pay attention to it. He understood that the wanderer would wander forever, or he will return to his master. But now it seems that Conrad has appeared again. Conrad was collecting money by completing bounty missions, and suddenly found himself in need of a large sum. If not, then it has something to do with Lily's death. Although Glenn was overwhelmed by emotions, Conrad was also calm. Shaking his hand, Conrad stated that his mistress was Lady Lilia, so he had no obligation to answer to Glenn. This only made Glenn angrier and angrier. His anger became stronger and stronger. Then he said, Nadia Hess. Conrad froze and Glenn continued, right after the accident. He started looking for some clue about Lilia's death, but he couldn't find any trace of the criminal. There wasn't even a ray of hope when he felt overwhelmed by the helplessness of this endless pursuit. He even started to think that it might actually have been just an unfortunate accident. But then strange things started happening. A girl has appeared who knows records from a century ago, and information that only the Baldwin family has. And now, even the bandit who disappeared shortly after her death has suddenly appeared. And Nadia Hess is the one who connects it all. Have them answer him what their intentions are. What do they know? Glenn started screaming. Conrad remained silent. After a brief silence, he spoke. His answer didn't change. He had nothing to say. The Duke's paranoid delusions have nothing to do with him, but he will give some advice. The Duke can't do anything. Let him give in and forget the past. It's the only way to treat his mistress with honor. Having said that, Conrad left, and Glenn repeated again that it was impossible for him to forget Lily. Allison saw Glenn in the hallway and asked where his lordship was going at that hour. Instead of answering, Glenn asked where Nadia Hess was at that moment. Allison replied that she had heard the ladies had gone to the Capitol to prepare for the debut, and what is it? Glenn again ignored the question and ordered an immediate departure to the Capitol. Glenn expected Conrad to react like that. There was only one thing he could rely on, and it was her, said Glenn, who he needed to meet with, Nadia Hess. In the morning, Vivian spoke about how fun the trip to the Capitol was. Nadia didn't know where Conrad had gone. He only left a note. Vivian asked if they really had to go through these difficulties. Everything would have been simpler if she had snuck into Karamzin's house, and it would have been more fun. Nadia explained that Count Karamzin was under serious suspicion, but they didn't have solid evidence. They need physical evidence, so they must watch them more closely. And they are the lucky ones. They might receive some unexpected information. Vivian noticed that Lady Karamzin seemed quite common when they saw her at the races. Nadia replied that she thought so too and believed that, if Count Karamzin was not guilty, Glenn and Uria's wedding had practically already taken place. That's right. Then there will be someone by Glenn's side instead of her. For this girl, she is more. For some reason, it took this smart girl a long time to understand this. Blanche pulled Nadia out of her thoughts, called her and greeted her. Nadia turned around and saw she didn't see anyone. Blanche was there and now he was gone. It turned out that Blanche fell while running towards Nadia. He greeted Nadia again. Nadia asked if the young duke was okay. Blanche replied that of course, that he falls all the time. Archie Blanche, the young duke of the Blanche family and cousin of Yuri Karamzin, before Nadia found out about their relationship. He made a very rude and clumsy proposal. Blanche said that Yuria hadn't gotten ready yet, so he rushed to greet Lady Hess in her place. Welcome, he is very happy that she accepted his invitation. Nadia said, no, she is grateful for the invitation. Nadia said that the young duke also likes horse racing, and it seems Lady Karamzin is delighted with it. Blanche replied no, that he wasn't particularly interested, that he came to watch them because he was only following Yuri. Nadia asked how he determined the winning horse. Blanche replied that he saw the glow of mana on that horse. Mana is the source of all power. If one awakens their mana, they can increase their power and overcome natural limits. He chose the Great Raven because he thought that mana is the only power all living beings have. Not only in the Great Raven, but in him and in Lady Hess, mana always exists and flows along with their life force. However, only a few who have the talent for it can awaken or feel mana. What a pity. If the lady could see it, they could talk about many things, replied Nadia. It seemed to her that she saw something similar. The Great Raven's heart shone like a gemstone, but she wasn't sure if it was mana. Blanche, apparently happy to finally be able to discuss his interest with someone. He approached suddenly. Then he asked if Lady Hess had ever thought about studying magic. Nadia replied that she didn't even know where they were studying it. Blanche replied that he would teach her. Despite his appearance, he is a confident magic user. Perhaps there is no one in the Empire who knows it better than he does. Nadia might have thought it sounded fun and seemed comfortable, but still. Nadia said she appreciated his offer, but unfortunately it still seemed difficult. She needs to prepare for the upcoming debutante ball and visit many interesting places. Blanche's pup was annoyed when Yuri suddenly shouted, "Lady Hess," to the whole courtyard. Finally, Yuri graced the boys with her presence. She asked from afar. No matter how long the lady waited, she immediately apologized for being late. On the map, the route turned out to be longer than she expected. Suddenly, Blanche shouted, "Yuri." He told her to be careful. She caused a stir with a steady trot. Yuria replied, that would be an understatement. The fact that she ran only a short distance must have scared Lady Hess. Ari is being overprotective of her. Blanche felt embarrassed, and Nadia said everything was fine. It seemed that Blanche realized he didn't stand a chance. And he said he needed to get something, so he apologized. Yuria would help her tour the estate. Yuria happily said that she could rely on her, and Nadia felt a sense of déjà vu. Blanche said goodbye and left, but Yuria couldn't wait anymore. She asked what they could do for fun. The lady didn't want to look at her horses. In fact, not long ago, she brought them the Great Raven. Looking at the horse, Nadia said that judging by the way the raven was frolicking, it liked being there. Yuria said she sincerely hoped so. Apparently, the rumors were just rumors. Nadia asked Yuria, who is usually very interested in horse racing. Yuria replied yes. She found it fascinating to watch the exciting races up close. But she also likes to just watch when she sees them running freely. She feels freer and envies them a little. And besides, horses are very empathetic when she sometimes feels sad. She seemed to understand this and hugged her with her head, said Nadia. Talks about the marriage with Count Baldwin continue. If they were to marry, she would be far from her horses, so she thought she would be very upset. What a strange way for our heroine to show her jealousy. Yuria became visibly sad and said she had also heard that story. Nadia replied yes, that if she is from the north, she will surely find out. Yuria said that, for sure, it is very possible that she actually doesn't want to marry the count. It may seem like a childish whim, but she wants at least a marriage where two people respect each other. However, such a thing is impossible with Duke Baldwin, Nadia asked. Why does Yuria think that? Is she sure the Duke will respect his wife? Yuria interrupted her and said, no, that won't happen. The Duke still can't forget the previous Duchess. For some reason, Nadia didn't feel happy about this, and although she should have felt flattered, she asked what the lady was talking about and said she had recently visited the Duke's residence until she set foot there for the first time. She was full of anticipation and excitement, but then, when she went in, she saw something. What made her warm heart instantly turn cold was that it was the previous Duchess's room. The things inside were clean without a speck of dust, but there were traces of its use. Even the servants cleaned the room as if the lady were still alive. And they prepared fresh water. This place was not the room of a dead person. It is not obvious who gave such an order. 10 years have passed, and in the Duke's heart, this room still belongs only to the former Duchess. Love seems so complicated. All this time Nadia was silent. She didn't understand why Glenn wouldn't let her go, although she herself didn't see anyone else by her side except him. Nadia decided that her death had been weighing on this boy all this time. Yuria said that her father said he doesn't have concubines, but she doesn't believe it. She noticed that Nadia was silent and asked if everything was okay. She looked pale. Nadia lied, saying that she just felt cold from the wind, so Yuria suggested going inside. And to treat her to a delicious meal, Nadia thanked her and returned to her thoughts. Yuria talked about how happy she was that they would go to the debutante ball together, and asked if there was any place Lady Hess would like to visit with her sometime. Nadia replied, of course, they say there are many desserts in the cafeteria. Yuria was visibly happy about their new friendship. Suddenly, someone called Yuria, and that voice alone made Yuria's bright smile disappear. It was her father, Count Karamzin, who didn't seem very kind and asked, "Yuri, back to grazing again?" Apparently, he wanted to say a swear word, but he noticed Nadia, who introduced herself immediately. She gave her name, but it meant nothing to the Count. That's why Nadia said that the Count had probably never heard of it. It's a small town. Upon hearing this, the Count immediately looked menacingly at his daughter and said, "How many times have I told you to only associate with people of your same level?" Yuria tried to defend her friend, but her father hit her with his cane and shouted at her to shut up. "Don't waste time with useless people." The guy clicked his tongue, expressing his discontent. And he added that, when she finally understands her role, the daughter is not important to him. Status and roles are more important to him. The guy ordered Yuri to follow him, putting such pressure on his child that it's clear this guy is disgusting. Yuria bit her lip in desperation and hopelessness, and then followed the guy. After a while, Vivian got angry and shouted, "What was wrong with that man? He hides it himself. What right does he have to talk about social classes?" Nadia reminded them that she would soon marry Baldwin, "So she will be on par with the Marquis," said Vivian. "It's still annoying. And what kind of lady is she? She behaved so sweetly with my lady, and then dared to follow the Count without saying a word." It's clear that Vivian knows nothing about the world. Nadia said she is sure Lady Yuria didn't want this. Perhaps Lady Karamzin is fighting her own lonely battle to free herself from her family. It's never easy. The saddest thing is that your family is your greatest enemy. The girls were about to return when Blanche suddenly returned and asked Nadia to wait. He said that Yuria told him what happened. He asks for forgiveness. Nadia replies that it's not worth it. Everything is fine. She asked Blanche to tell Yuria not to worry. Blanche bit his tongue, apparently preparing to say something. He pulled a letter from his pocket and asked if it wasn't too much trouble, could the lady. To accept this invitation, he had rushed to write a letter. Blanche said awkwardly that they would soon be holding a social party. He will be happy if Lady Hess comes too, but he must tell her that she has no chance, so as not to get her hopes up. The ducal house of Blanche and the family of Count Karamzin are cousins, so they meet often. Getting closer to the young duke seemed like a good opportunity, so Nadia accepted. "The boy was wrong. I shouldn't have said it like that," said Blanche. He was afraid she would refuse. But now he is calm. He will wait for the meeting. They will see each other again at the party. While the naive boy greeted her happily, deciding that Nadia was interested in him. Nadia herself was thinking. Think about it, she found a solution to her problem so quickly that she is grateful to the young duke. Finally, Vivian said the obvious. It seemed that the young duke had his eyes on Nadia. Nadia said she thought it was because they both had mana, speaking of which, she will need a new dress for the party. She could ask Vivian. Later, Vivian asked if my lady knew from the beginning that the young duke was a mage. Nadia replied yes, that he seemed close to Lady Karamzin, so she decided to look for basic information about him. Vivian said that a typical mage would try to earn a reputation, and moreover, she had never heard any rumors about him. That was true, but he didn't seem like the type of person who cared about his reputation if people found out he was a mage. It would only bring trouble. Nadia remembered Conrad and asked if he had arrived yet. As soon as Nadia said this, Conrad appeared at the threshold and asked if my lady had called him. Nadia asked when he returned, and Conrad replied, "A very short time ago, if you have an order." "He is ready." Then Nadia said that she hadn't called him for this. Where had he been all this time? Conrad became visibly nervous, and his silence caused Nadia to change the subject. She said that if it was a personal matter, he was not obligated to answer. He had a right to his time. But knowing Conrad's character, we understand perfectly that he will not be able to hide anything from his mistress. As expected, he said that, in fact, he was going out to meet Duke Baldwin. It seemed he had revealed something to the Duke. Nadia froze when Conrad said this. Coming back to herself, Nadia asked if Conrad hadn't just prevented them from finding the key, but had also deliberately allowed him to find it on his own. Conrad replied that what Nadia said was true, but that it was not necessary to react to that provocation. And she asked him if he had any reason to find Glenn. She needed the truth. Conrad, after a brief silence, said that the most important thing for him was the lady's happiness. Lady Nadia said she didn't want her return to her past life, but she also stated that she couldn't help but pay attention to Duke Baldwin. Therefore, for Lady Nadia to be free, Duke Baldwin must leave the past behind. And to start living in the present, he is still clinging on, unable to accept it. But Lilia's death cannot be undone by the impatience to give Lady Nadia the future she dreams of. He acted without care, and that is why he asks for forgiveness. Nadia remained silent. Finally, she spoke. She asked Conrad to lift his head and admitted that he was right. Perhaps she also needed someone to remind her of reality. Nadia knows she is now full of contradictions. She says she doesn't want to be Lily again, but she is worried about Glenn's happiness, which anyone would think is strange. Besides, Nadia cannot forget her past, which is full of terrible people. Yes, she might be overexerting herself. She might not be the one to make Glenn happy. But if that accident is still haunting him, she wants at least to take responsibility for it. Nadia said this would be the last time. They would really make it the last time. When they say this, it immediately becomes clear that it is not the last. Even her longing for the happy moments spent with Glenn and the desire to see that childish smile again. It seems Nadia never saw Glenn as a husband. And this is clear, he was a baby, Nadia suddenly declared. After revealing the truth about the accident, she will let Conrad go. Unfortunately, she still needs his help. "You could trust in my strength a little more," replied Conrad. There was no need to apologize. If it were for Nadia's happiness, he would help with anything. Nadia thanked him. And yet, Nadia was sad because she would no longer see the sweet smile of the baby. She remembered again how Glenn said he would take responsibility and make her happy. Vivian looked sadly at Nadia and asked if my lady was okay. Nadia, without raising her head, replied yes. "I'm fine right now. She is definitely on the right path, so everything is fine," she said with a sad look. Yuria, for her part, couldn't forget that incident and was still sad. Repeating that moment again, Yuria spoke with a sad look. Lady Hess must have been disappointed in her. She looked at the desserts and thought, "These desserts, Lady Hess even bought her cute desserts." And she showed her unpleasant side. She started to complain, but quickly recomposed herself, thinking, Ari said the lady was also invited to the party. Then she will normally apologize, but what if the lady doesn't forgive her? Yuria tormented herself with thoughts. Then a man entered and said that Duke Baldwin had just arrived at the property. And here an awkward situation arose. Yuria was sitting across from Glenn and didn't know what to say at all. And he wasn't very talkative, and Glenn finally broke the awkward silence. He apologized for arriving without notice. Yuria replied that it was fine. She had nothing against it. She wanted to ask him why he came, but she didn't have time. Glenn interrupted her and asked her, "I apologize, but perhaps Lady Hess is here," replied Yuria. "No, the lady recently returned home," said Glenn, disappointed understandably. And he thought, damn it, I had heard that she had arrived at Count Karamzin's estate. But he had arrived at the wrong time. He missed her. Yuri. Looking at his terrible expression, she wondered why the Duke was suddenly looking for Lady Hess. She doesn't think she's ever seen him like this, but suddenly Yuria realized something. Could it be that the Duke had become interested in Lady Hess? Thinking about it, Yuria stared at Glenn. She was very curious, but she was afraid that asking would seem rude. Still, she gathered her courage and called out to Glenn, telling him she didn't know if it would be of help. But Lady Hess was invited to the next party at the Blanche family's house. And of course, this caught Glenn's attention. And again Glenn fell silent. It was clear that he was thinking hard about something. Finally, he asked if Lady Karamzin could help him, which could not help but surprise Yuria. The day of the party arrived. A whole line of carriages formed. People commented on how glamorous the Blanche family was. You can feel the elegance in every detail, worthy of one of the two great ducal families of the empire. The Karamzin family is also here today. These families have always been united. Vivian, having received the letter, returned to Nadia. This man was sent by Conrad, and Vivian replied that yes, she had received a letter from her boss. It was a report on the matter she had requested. They discovered suspicious actions of Count Karamzin. The Count is a member of the Salon, run by the Marchioness Alan. At first glance, it seems to be a place for the usual literature discussion. But if we investigate further, it seems there is a separate secret meeting. The pseudonym that Count Laban uses means that he is definitely involved in something where his identity cannot be revealed. This is a list of participants whose identities have been established so far. Nadia wondered if she should approach him directly to receive an invitation to that secret meeting. First, she decided to look more closely at the participants on this list. If they found a thread, they could determine the purpose of this meeting. After talking about work, Nadia finally decided to go to the gymnasium. But Vivian stopped her and smiled mischievously. Then she said, "Work is work, but you should enjoy the party. I will take full responsibility for watching the Count. That's why I ask my lady not to worry, and to show everyone that you are the most beautiful girl in the world." Before leaving, they introduced Nadia to the people. Of course, she didn't know who she was. Nadia thought she should greet the young Duchess first. She was trying to find her when she heard the conversations of people calling her family upstarts, that they had recently become rich. As expected, the party is nothing but a mob of unpleasant people who look down on everyone. Ignoring all this talk, Blanche approached Nadia and said, "Here she is." He was glad Lady Hesse came to the party, because he didn't miss the chance to become her companion. Because he was very interested in taking this place, since Lady Hesse was his guest. Nadia said no, that she had just arrived and was alone. Blanche said there were some people he wanted to introduce to her. Would the lady like to go with him? Nadia accepted, and they went out to the balcony. But there was no one there, so Nadia asked where the people the young Duke wanted to introduce her to were. Blanche smiled mischievously and said that it was actually a lie. Crowded places are uncomfortable, and there are many reasons to worry. Besides, it is much better to spend time with her here and not. Soon there will be another broken heart. Nadia laughed and said, "Really?" Blanche said that if he had arrived sooner, she wouldn't have had to deal with so much rudeness. Since he invited her personally, he wanted to give her only good memories. Nadia replied that everything was fine, that she was already used to that kind of thing. Blanche was surprised. Then Nadia asked, "It sounds strange, but actually everything is fine." Nadia heard this when she was still Lily. Until she got tired, there was a time when it seemed unfair to her. And when she is sad, if from anger she feels even more pity, and if this will only be weakness, then it is better to stop feeling anything. Blanche stared at Nadia and said, "It's fascinating, you're quite young, but unlike your peers. You seem more mature." Nadia hastened to declare that she had often been told that, and Blanche was once again lost in his thoughts. He no longer looked like the sweet, clumsy boy he was back then, Blanche said. But even so, he doesn't think she likes his words about being fine. Nadia looked at him in surprise, and he said, "The day you visited Count Karamzin's estate, you also said everything was fine, that you knew little about Lady Hesse, but you seemed to be lying." However, Blanche thought about it, and finally he asked if Lady Hesse would like to see. He asked her to come closer. When Nadia approached, Blanche raised his hand and began to create mana. Nadia asked if that was magic. Blanche replied that it is, that if she studies magic she can do the same. The best way to become a mage is to be able to control mana. That is why this path is open only to the chosen, but curses are different. Unlike magic, which requires preparation, the only thing needed to curse is hatred in the heart and the desire to express it. This makes them even more dangerous because they don't require any special talent, and anyone can easily impose them, sometimes for no reason and sometimes even spontaneously, because it corrodes a person's soul, and in the end, any curse that is uttered always returns. The dark light scared Nadia, so Blanche took it away and asked if she was used to curses. Over time, she begins to accept them as truth, but why not start believing a little more in herself? From what he saw, she was a beautiful adult girl, and this boy was the only one who gave her the right advice. Glenn can only talk about love and romance. She was told to believe in herself for the first time. It would be worth directing your attention towards this guy, but it doesn't matter. Nadia thought that, to be honest, She still wasn't sure how she could believe in herself. Or at least she tried to, but as if feeling encouraged, Nadia thanked Blanche. Blanche replied, "You're welcome," and suggested they really enjoy the party. And so they did, and it seems that Nadia and Blanche are having a good time together. After a while, Nadia got tired and sat down to rest. It had been a long time since she had drunk. It's getting hotter and hotter. Although it's late, there are still many people here. She thought she couldn't match the spirit of youth when she suddenly noticed two boys. These were the people from the list. They started to go somewhere, so Nadia decided to follow them. In the hallway, the boy said, "The day of truth is almost here." They can't even imagine how many times their faith has wavered. "In the last 10 years, the second one added, but still they managed to succeed. The white swan exists." Nadia caught up with them and eavesdropped on the conversation. Nadia didn't know what they were talking about, but that's why she decided to continue the pursuit. However, when she grabbed the railing, it creaked loudly, of course. The boys heard it. Nadia realized she had to escape. If they found her, she was dead. She decided she needed to hide, when suddenly a hand appeared right in front of her and pulled her. Nadia wanted to say something, but Glenn asked her to calm down. Right now, the most important thing was to get out of there. Then Nadia wondered why Glenn was on Duke Blanche's property. She asked how his lordship had gotten there, but Glenn gestured for her to be quiet. The boys said they heard a noise, someone hiding in the hallway. They decided to check every corner, because our lovebirds are hiding here. If someone hears their conversation, there will be trouble. If there is the slightest possibility that they will have difficulties, they will solve it on their own. They continued to examine the corners, but apparently our lovebirds are transparent, because these two didn't find anyone. Suddenly, a loud noise was heard from the other side of the hallway, and the guy ran there. Although this man had doubts and wanted to go further, he continued in the other direction. Glenn said it was safe now. One of his subordinates distracted their attention. It was time to leave, since the opportunity had arisen. Nadia thanked him for his help, and then she asked why his lordship was there. She hadn't heard anything, so that his lordship could be invited to the party. Glenn said that for now it would be better to move to another place. They arrived at the garden, and Glenn said they could talk there. Nadia asked. Now he would answer her. Why did Glenn come here? He was silent for a moment. He looked at Nadia and said, "I was looking for Miss Hess." Nadia was surprised, and Glenn said he didn't know. Whether she knows it or not, there are many traces of his wife that lead to her. It's really strange every time she follows the tracks she left behind. Her name appears everywhere, and he sees her shadow, Nadia Hess. She knows something related to Lilia, and she is hiding this fact from him. He doesn't care why she does it. If there is any clue related to Lily, he will find it by any means necessary. Even if he had to threaten her safety to do so, said Nadia, the fact that he was telling her now means that his lordship has changed his mind. Glenn remained silent. He thought there were more than one or two suspicious moments, not only in what had happened before, but there are also many contradictions in her actions. But why did it seem like she was suffering more than him? And that look, which reminded him of Lily, for some reason didn't give him peace. Finally, he said this was the last chance he could give the lady if she answered his questions. Only then will he believe her and ask her to make the right decision. In other words, Glenn didn't give her the option to refuse. Nadia replied, "Okay. She will tell everything after a while," said Glenn. Like Conrad, she was Lilia's secret confidant. And based on the suspicious traces found at the scene of the accident, he concluded that someone had deliberately caused it. They determined that Count Karamzin was the most likely suspect, and since then, they have been trying to obtain information about him. He still wants to ask many questions, but for now he understands the situation, and if we talk about the Toldo's salons, what she spoke about, naturally Conrad could not get there. It was under imperial protection. It is a place where certain members of the nobility meet to perform dubious acts in the name of the imperial family. In return, the imperial palace protects them, although it is not yet clear if they are really connected to Lilia. In that case, he will take care of this matter before they could finish speaking. Two young ladies arrived. They greeted each other and began to praise Glenn, ignoring Nadia. It was said that Count Reuben was spreading the rumor that the Duke's health had allegedly worsened. But what is most surprising is that he is here with Lady Hess and in such a secluded place. What a clear clue, of course, to prevent the rumors from spreading. Nadia began to justify herself, saying that they had misunderstood everything. But Glenn approached her and whispered, perhaps assuming their intentions matched. He would appreciate her help in the short term. It seems Glenn has found something. Then he said he was already a little late. For being with Lady Hess, he had simply forgotten the time. Maybe they should go back to the dance, Nadia. Glenn turned to her informally and offered her his hand. Seeing this, the girl apologized for her lack of tact and said they were leaving. But before leaving, she cast another cold look in Nadia's direction. Then Nadia shouted, "Why did the Duke do this? What if people misunderstand them?" The Duke stated that that was his intention. The imperial family was interested in the Duke's marriage. And for them, the marriage between him and the Karamzin family is already a fait accompli. But if a scandal suddenly arises that is unexpected for those who took everything as a fact, this would be very interesting news. Nadia understood what Glenn was doing. He is trying to provoke the Count's henchmen, who are hiding behind the imperial family. But still, it's okay if he accidentally offends the imperial family. Glenn could be in danger. Nadia was also worried that her resolution about the last time would waver, said Glenn. Noticing her expression, he doesn't want to force her. The situation can still be clarified, but if she cooperates, he promises her a generous reward. Not only in economic terms, but also of status. He knows it is dangerous for her. He understands, but she is the only one he can ask for help. Only she shares memories of Lily. He remembers it, and once again, Nadia made that same facial expression. She was sad because when Glenn said her name, he looked so sad. Then she agreed to cooperate with him, stating that she had a duty towards Lady Lilia. However, she has a question if he discovers the truth about the Duchess's death. Will his wounds heal at least a little? Glenn replied that, however, he wasn't sure if he ever saw his wife again. Standing in front of her, he could stand a little prouder. Nadia hid her sad face and thanked him for the answer. They headed to the estate, and Nadia said she didn't know he knew Blanche's family. She hadn't heard any stories of meetings between him and Blanche's family. Glenn replied, there was no connection between them. That's why he could only arrive at the party as Lady Karamzin's companion. In the same way, Nadia felt a slight note of sadness when she learned that Glenn had arrived as Lady Karamzin's companion. For someone who tells Glenn to forget the past and move on, she shouldn't have to experience this. We are equals, said Glenn. If word gets out about them, Lady Karamzin will also be happy. When he asked her to help him meet Nadia, she seemed inspired. And then Nadia breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that Glenn wasn't clinging to the past at all. She needs to accept her feelings and stop lying to herself, said Glenn, reaching out his hand. Then maybe it's time to back these rumors. They entered the hall together. Their joint arrival made the audience look only at them. People began to talk about how the Duke and Lady Hess had such a relationship. If they want to gossip, let them shut up. Nadia was burning with shame. At that moment, Blanche approached and told her that he was looking for her because she had suddenly disappeared. Nadia apologized and said she felt dizzy, so she went out to get some fresh air. Glenn greeted him and told him it had been a long time since they had seen each other. Blanche replied that he didn't remember the last time he saw the Duke. Then Glenn said it was an honor for him to accompany Nadia and that they would see each other next time. And now he has to leave. Having said that, Glenn left. And Blanche said, as for Lady Hess's head, did it feel better? But Nadia wasn't listening to Blanche. Her gaze was still fixed on Glenn. Blanche followed her gaze and looked at Glenn, who was chatting with the others. And then we returned to Nadia, who was looking at Glenn with loving eyes. Blanche understood everything instantly, and although he was sad, he smiled at her. And he said, the lady is probably tired, maybe you should go rest. He will take her to the carriage. Nadia agreed, and arm in arm with Blanche they walked towards the exit. Count Karamzin watched her from above and said, that's it. This is it, the heart of the white swan that was destined for them. As expected, the rumors spread quickly. Everyone was talking about the Duke and Lady Hess. Everyone was whispering that Glenn saw Nadia often. It seemed that he was madly in love with her. The rumors became so big that Glenn and Nadia were already married. Only 2 girls asked Nadia directly if these rumors were true. And Nadia stuttered, not knowing what to answer them. On one hand, she had to support the story. On the other hand, you can't exaggerate. Glenn was at this party. So Nadia looked in his direction. And he smiled and nodded at her, so that Nadia's heart began to beat faster. It was a sign that Nadia should support the story. At the estate, Glenn was with Nadia again. She said she knew this was only being done to fool people. And for the scandal to reach the imperial family, it would be better if they appeared together more often. But he didn't have to go so far in that short time. Glenn showered Nadia with gifts and praise, and much more. At this rate, Glenn will never get married, thought Nadia. Glenn replied that that was a fact, unless they wanted to tarnish the Duke's name. And thanks to this, an effect is observed, albeit weak, he said earlier. That his marriage to Karamzin was a predetermined fact, but after the party, a rumor spread. And this inspired confidence in Count Karamzin's supporters, provided they supported the atmosphere. And they will be attentive to the Count, soon they will receive new clues. Of course, the same goes for the White Swan on the day of truth. Nadia froze. She immediately remembered the two strangers who had told her about it. Glenn said, however, that now he is asking Nadia to focus on the debutante ball, because it is very likely that the Emperor is interested in her. That is why it is better to prepare in advance. Nadia darkened just by imagining this. Glenn began to think that this girl might appear at the debutante ball. We need to prepare properly. First we must choose a dress. Glenn began to analyze everything. Her red hair would go well with a dress in soft tones. He doesn't think it makes sense to wear bulky accessories. Glenn seemed to have a good knowledge of fashion and thought that her eyes should stand out as much as possible. When their gazes met, Glenn seemed to freeze. He was enchanted. Nadia asked if she had something on her face. Then Glenn recomposed himself and said no. Not at all. Unnecessary thoughts, he thought, and said, in any case, if you need anything, you can say so. Anything she wants or demands of him. At that moment, Nadia remembered again that day in the garden. When little Glenn asked for a dance as a reward, that was when he asked for it. Could the Duke teach me to dance? How funny. Because she knows how to dance. She doesn't need anything in particular. She just wants to be with the Duke, like in the old days. As soon as Nadia realized what she said, she immediately got scared. She started to mutter, she meant it, but she couldn't finish. Nadia forgot herself. Giving in to her emotions, she told all this, and when she tried to evade it, it only made things worse. She felt ashamed. Glenn's imperturbable gaze only confused Nadia more. She kept apologizing, but finally her suffering came to an end when Glenn accepted. He stood up and said he had some free time so they could spend it practicing. And now Nadia was already standing in the hallway. She looked worried, she was thinking all the time. There was no need to rush, but Glenn pulled her out of the abyss of thoughts, telling her that there was enough space there. We can start. Nadia shyly took Glenn's hand, and they began to dance in circles. At first it was awkward, but now the tension had eased a bit, and Nadia looked at Glenn with embarrassment. He, who was also looking at her, didn't take his eyes off her. And Nadia's heart began to beat faster. The girl who in her childhood reached his waist. Now he is much taller than her, and she has to lift her head. Well, what was previously smaller and softer has become hard. And big enough to cover her, in fact, her little young boyfriend. He became a wonderful adult without her knowing. During all these 10 years, she didn't know. It's funny, but Glenn was thinking about the same day as Nadia. He noticed she was starting to stay half a step behind, the same habit Lilia had. Nadia claimed she had learned a lot from his wife, and that she had also adopted that habit. Thinking about it, Glenn told himself he should stop. It wasn't worth getting carried away by useless thoughts, and although he knew it, he couldn't forget that clear day. When he and Lily danced together, when he was still a clumsy baby. A small child who tried to hide his shyness. Kindness that silently and imperceptibly manifested itself in the way. Understanding his immaturity. Still, little Glenn tried to look Lily in the eye. When their gazes met, Lily smiled softly, as if saying everything was okay. This memory was dear to Glenn, but also to Nadia. They had changed, but they looked at each other with the same look. Glenn let go of her hand and said that Nadia shouldn't worry at this stage. If there is anything else she needs, he will help her anyway. Before leaving, Glenn said that Nadia didn't have to be afraid. He would be on her side. Nadia thanked him and he left. She blushed and asked her heart to calm down. And in the Karamzin house, Yuri was happily discussing the rumors about Lady Hess and Duke Baldwin. There's a rumor that they are dating, which Ari believes is true. She played an important role in this, so I hope it's true. This will surely help her when she makes peace with Lady Hess later on. Yuri was happy for Nadia and Glenn and also hoped to become friends with her, which cannot be said of Blanche. Nadia was in the store and didn't know what to choose. Vivian asked if the lady was buying a gift for Duke Baldwin. Nadia answered yes. He gave her too much, and that's why she wants to give him something in return. He even sent me a very expensive, custom-made dress. The girl asked why she didn't try to choose something that matched his image. For example, what color does she imagine when she thinks of him? Then Nadia's eyes lit up, she thought, when she thinks of Glenn. What comes to mind this time is that Nadia imagined an adult Glenn. And after that, Nadia quickly decided what kind of decoration she should choose. The girl said, "It's a wonderful choice. This red stone symbolizes an unchanging heart. This will be a special gift. Nadia really found a suitable gift. Nadia was very happy with this, but there was a drawback. It was expensive, unimaginably expensive. She was lucky to have enough money, but after the purchase, there was nothing left. As a thrifty person, she began to think about how to tighten her belt. Suddenly, she heard a scream. It was Yuria who was screaming. She is very tired. Today she will go alone, so she will stop following her. Blanche sighed wearily, not knowing what to do. Then he noticed Nadia, who was standing right in front of him. The meeting immediately became awkward after that fight. A little later, Blanche became sad and muttered, showing her his shameful side. She was probably in shock. He was really sorry. Nadia insisted that everything was fine, and she said, by the way, if this wouldn't be considered rude of her. When she was able to ask what started their fight, Blanche replied that it seemed like he made Yuria feel depressed. Before, a street show was taking place in the square, and attracted by the singing, she tried to go out into the crowd. And when he tried to stop her, he accidentally raised his voice. In the end, this turned into a fight, and then Nadia asked, is there any reason why Blanche stopped her? She doesn't believe the young duke did this without reason. Blanche became sadder, lost in his thoughts, and then said, in fact, Yuria has a weak body. If she exerts herself too much, she gets sick easily, and she often ends up bedridden for long periods of time. He is the culprit behind all this, admitted Blanche. It happened a long time ago. When she was little, Yuria had no one. She was under strict supervision by Karamzin. That's why she often followed him in that environment. He was probably the only one she could approach calmly. But her company irritated little Blanche. That's why Blanche coldly rejected her kindness and ran away from her. He hid, desperately ignoring this girl, and then one rainy day, he was nervous about something and said some hurtful words to Yuri. He couldn't contain his pride and let his anger out. Yuria followed him to make peace. That was when the accident happened. Little Yuria fell. The old bridge had reached the end of its lifespan and broke under the weight of the baby. Yuria fell into a fast-flowing torrent that swallowed her. Since that day, Yuria has been ill for a long time. Blanche again began to blame himself for everything, saying that if he hadn't turned away from Yuria then, if he had been a little more honest, this wouldn't have happened. Now he is always worried. What if what he did to Yuria really made her suffer? When Blanche finished speaking, he suddenly realized that the story was dark. Then he apologized and said it was a bit of an uncomfortable topic and that Nadia could forget about it. But Nadia refused immediately. She said no, that she was thinking, which means she understands the young duke's feelings a little. Nadia remembered the day Glenn tried to take care of her. The more valuable a person is, the stricter you become, even knowing how much pain the other person feels. In the end, you can't help but do it. Nadia regretted having acted that way that day, but she couldn't change it. Then she smiled and said there was no need to blame himself too much. Lady Karamzin certainly knew that Blanche was worried. If a conflict arises with someone dear, it is enough just to share your true feelings and make peace. Even if it seems too late, it doesn't matter how deep the wound is. As long as you are alive, everything can be fixed, so wouldn't it be good to get rid of some of that anxiety? If the young duke needed a reason to approach Yuria, she could help him. Suddenly, Blanche, instead of answering, rested his head on Nadia's shoulder. Then he whispered something in a low voice, so low that even Nadia didn't hear anything. Then he quickly raised his head and said, asking for forgiveness. He felt relief for a moment, and he forgot himself. He thanked Nadia for calming him down and said, Lady Hess is really a good person. Nadia replied in a low voice. No, she might not remember, but the young duke had calmed her before. The young duke will also be a truly good man someday. Blanche said that someday, if the lady suddenly needs help, he hopes to be able to approach him. Whatever it is, he will try to do his best. Nadia smiled brightly at Blanche and said, That's okay. Yuria was walking sadly, wondering if she had been too cruel. She got angry and lost her patience, because he wouldn't let her do what she wanted. He is only worried about her. I need to go back and apologize. Yuria decided to go look for her brother, when she suddenly realized. While talking to Nadia, at that moment, Yuri remembered that day again. She thought that perhaps Lady Hess was still angry with her. Yuria decided that this was her chance, the perfect moment to apologize. God gave it to her so she could ask for forgiveness. Yuria is really an unusual girl, with a great imagination. She approached and began to think about what to say to her. Perhaps something like, It's been a while, Lady Hess. And then, naturally, she made a serious mistake that day. She is truly sorry. She completely disagrees with her father's ideas. and she hopes Lady Hess will be her friend. Yuria is still a child, so she gathered her courage and decided to act. But she was interrupted. The girl stopped her and greeted her. The girl asked if Yuria was alone and looked in the same direction as Yuria. Upon seeing Nadia, the girl's look turned cold and she said, "This is the woman who seduced Duke Baldwin." Right, and now she is trying to flirt with young Duke Blanche. What a greedy girl, she offered to put Nadia in her place. She decided that this would give her a few points in her relationship with Lady Karamzin. But how wrong she was. Yuria told Lady Headington directly that she should not dare to insult her friend with such vulgar words. If she starts belittling the people she cares about again, she won't let it go. The girl is shocked by Yuria's words. She shouted, "I was just trying to help. If the lady doesn't need it, that's fine." She ran away in a hurry, and Yuria looked at her with disgust. That's why she didn't notice how Blanche and Nadia were walking towards her. Upon noticing them, she feared that Nadia would think she was being rude. And since Nadia was here this whole time, she will think that Yuria slandered her. Nadia in Yuri's imagination and in reality were very different. The poor girl decided that her plan to apologize had failed. Nadia began to talk about what happened, but Yuria interrupted her. She shouted loudly, "This is all a misunderstanding. She doesn't think the same way as Lady Headington." Nadia never judged or thought ill of my Lady Hess and tried to calm Yuria down. But Yuri couldn't stop. She spoke, even though she hadn't been able to spend much time with her. She knows that Lady Hess is a good person. When they met, she wanted to get closer to her. The poor girl thought, "I hate looking pathetic." Everything went wrong from the beginning. She burst into tears and admitted that she just wanted to be Nadia's friend.